winners at this year's TRIC Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GBNews Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you and a very happy Friday. It's 3 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster all across the UK. On today's show, is it time for Joe to go? After Joe Biden's disastrous TV debate with Trump last night, described as a car crash, and the Democrats' DEFCON 1 moment. Top donors today demanding the president stands aside for a younger candidate as they pull the plug. But who might that be? And can anybody stop the Trump train? Next up, the Reform Party has axed a volunteer after an undercover sting exposed their reprehensible comments. But should political leaders be responsible for everything that activists say or do? And if so, why isn't that same rule applied to all political parties? Next story, ghoulish tourists are flocking to the Airbnb apartment where Jay Slater was last seen alive, then heading out on so-called sleuth safaris in an attempt to retrace the missing teen's final steps. We'll have all the latest on this ghoulish story from Tenerife. And a 12-year-old Jewish boy was visited by a Prevent Counterterrorism officer and the police after he posted on social media, "I want to see Hamas obliterated." And then they even tried to confiscate his wooden toy crossbow that apparently had the power of a potato gun. We'll speak to the activist who's helping the boy to get justice. And that's all coming up in your next hour. Well, the show. So as the dust settles on what was an absolute car crash of a live TV debate over in America, the betting on Joe Biden, can you believe this? He is now just 21% likely to win the next presidential race if he stands. Donors are pulling the plugs. There's a massive, massive panic. Is it time for Joe Biden to stand down? And if so, who on earth can replace him with only a few months to go until that big election on November 5th? Send your thoughts in the usual ways. gbnews.com/your say. But before all of that, let's kick off with your latest news headlines.
Good afternoon, it's 2 minutes past 3. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says the leader of Reform UK has questions to answer after a video emerged of a campaigner making racist comments. Andrew Parker was seen making a series of offensive remarks about Rishi Sunak. He's now apologised but insists he was goaded into making them. Rishi Sunak says it's part of a broader pattern of behaviour, a warning the following clip contains some offensive language.
When my two daughters have to see and hear Reform people who campaign for Nigel Farage calling me an effing, it hurts and it makes me angry, and I think he has some questions to answer. When you see Reform candidates and campaigners seemingly using racist and misogynistic language and opinions, seemingly without challenge, I think it tells you something about the culture within the Reform Party. Our politics and country is better than that. It's my duty to call out this corrosive and divisive behaviour.
Well, the video was obtained by Channel 4 News. They've rigorously defended the clip's veracity, but Nigel Farage described it as a setup.
Someone told us he was an actor. We rang him this morning, the Daily Telegraph rang him this morning. He denied point blank that he was an actor. It turns out he is an actor. I found his website. He's a well-spoken actor who does something called rough speaking. Well, I was in the office when he arrived last Saturday, and he was doing rough speaking. It was an act right from the very start.
So you'd met him?
I was working, and he came in and came up to me and said hello, and then he went out canvassing where the undercover filming took place. And he was rough speaking. He wasn't being himself from day one. I have to tell you, this whole thing is a complete and total setup.
Well, responding to Mr Farage's claims, a spokesperson for Channel 4 News says, "We strongly stand by our rigorous and duly impartial journalism, which speaks for itself. We met Mr Parker for the first time at Reform UK's headquarters, where he was a Reform Party canvasser. We did not pay the Reform UK canvasser or anyone else in this report. Mr Parker was not known to Channel 4 News and was filmed covertly via the undercover operation." Well, in other news, the US president clashed with Donald Trump last night in the first televised debate in the race for the White House. With nearly 2 months to go until he's formally nominated as the Democratic nominee, Joe Biden had hopes to build more support for his re-election. But the president often struggled to counter Donald Trump, allowing the former president to make a series of claims without being challenged on their truthfulness. Rather than quashing concerns about his age, Joe Biden's stilted and shaky performance has reignited concerns within the Democratic Party over whether he ought to be their nominee. Police in Tenerife are calling for specialist volunteers to take part in a new large-scale search for a missing British teenager. Jay Slater went missing 12 days ago, and police have been scouring CCTV footage for his last known movements. The Spanish Civil Guard said in a statement that the latest search would begin at 9 o'clock local time tomorrow in the village of Masca. They're asking for volunteers with experience as fire crews and professional search and rescue. The Metropolitan Police says a total of 27 Just Stop Oil supporters have been arrested in a coordinated raid after the group threatened to disrupt summer holidays. 4 people were arrested on Tuesday after being identified at Gatwick Airport and have since been released on bail. It also comes after 6 members of the group, some described as being key organisers, were arrested in Hackney in East London last night. HSBC is the latest bank to apologise to customers after some were locked out of their online banking. Many people encountered difficulties on what's commonly payday for workers across the country. It comes after other high street banks saw glitches, with Virgin Money and Nationwide also apologising to their customers. Princess Anne has returned home after several days in hospital with minor injuries and concussion. The 73-year-old is believed to have been struck by a horse while walking even on her Gatcombe Park estate in Gloucestershire on Sunday evening. Yesterday, her husband, Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, thanks the team at Southmead Hospital for their care, expertise and kindness. A house in Los Angeles where Marilyn Monroe lived and tragically died has been saved from demolition. It comes after the Brentwood home was bought by the couple who lived in a neighbouring property who plans to replace it with an extension. The City Council has now voted unanimously to declare the Spanish colonial-style home a historical landmark, which prevents any substantial alterations. However, the couple reportedly have no plans to put it up for sale and say they'll appeal the decision. It was the only house ever owned by the Hollywood icon. She lived there for 6 months until her death in 1962. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Cameron. Now let's get cracking. After a decidedly rocky debate performance last night, senior figures in the Democratic Party are now contemplating removing Joe Biden as the party's presumptive nominee and replacing him with someone else at the party's August convention. Joe Biden appeared confused at times in that debate. And let's take a quick look at one of those awkward moments.
Eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
Absolutely astonishing moment. And our US correspondent Stephen Edgington spoke to those in Washington, D.C. for their verdicts on that debate.
Who do you think won the debate tonight? I think in terms of opinion, Biden won, but in terms of everything else, Trump won. And you're a Biden voter? I personally am, even though I'm not a fan of either voter, but if I had to pick, I'd vote Biden. So did your mind change tonight after watching Biden? It didn't, but I have significantly less faith than I ever did. Why? Because he's getting old, and I know they asked about that, and I personally don't believe him in his answer, but it's just a personal policy thing. I agree with Biden more than I agree with Trump, so I'm still going to vote for him. And what do you think of Trump's performance? I think Trump presents himself very well. I think, it's very easy to get caught up in the information because, Trump says one thing, Biden says another. But I think overall he did well. I mean, I'm glad that he was willing to come to CNN. What do you think of Trump's performance?
I think it was remarkably good. I did not start out as a Trump voter. In 2016, I voted for Hillary. In 2020, I voted for Vermin Supreme. This time, I'm voting for Trump. And I think Trump did an absolutely fantastic job in this debate, better than his previous one.
Did Biden look old tonight? He was just like squinting the whole time. He's like this the whole time, and he's just like, you could tell that he's like trying to think of what he's trying to say, and he's just these long pauses. They're just awkward. Who do you think won the debate tonight?
Donald Trump, absolutely.
Why?
He was the only one who actually could, A, speak coherently, and B, articulate a record of success and a vision for the future.
Well, as the dust settles, I'm now joined by that man, GB News' US correspondent, Stephen Edgington. Steve, welcome to the show. What can we say? That debate has been called a crime scene. It's been called a medical emergency. The Democrats' DEFCON 1 moment. Stephen, overnight, Biden has plummeted to only a 21% chance of winning the next presidential election. Donors are threatening to pull out. Steve, it's fair to say it was a terrible night at the office for Joe Biden.
I think the Democrats are in absolute chaos after this debate. Some people are speculating that they sort of set up Biden to fail so they could replace him as their candidate ahead of November. I don't think that's true. I think the expectations were very low for Biden, and many Democrats thought that he simply had to get through the debate without stumbling on his words too many times, and it would look like he'd won. But actually, he failed that very low bar. In so many instances in the debates, there were so many moments where Biden simply couldn't string a sentence together. And if Biden looked asleep, Trump looked awake. He pounced on every single mistake that Biden made, and he twisted his words and managed to verbally sort of assault him. It was incredible. Trump, I think, had a really good night last night. Whereas, as you say, Biden, I think the Democrats are considering whether he should be their candidate in November.
And Steve, the entire format was set up to favour Joe Biden. The muted microphones, no audience, 5 days of preparation. He knew what the questions were going to be, and still, actually, the format ended up being his downfall. Team Trump put a video out just of compilations of Joe Biden unable to speak, as you said, just with haunting piano music in the background. It actually, Stephen, doesn't look funny anymore. It actually looks a bit cruel. This guy doesn't look well. Surely the right thing has to be done both for the Democrat Party and the America and the entire free world. And they need to get rid of Joe Biden now.
I think it's worth saying that CNN would deny that Biden saw the questions beforehand, but certainly the debate sort of rules were meant to, I think, favour Biden. And actually they ended up favouring Trump because Trump didn't interrupt Biden once or very little. And that made Trump look quite calm and moderated compared to his more angry debate performances in 2020. In terms of whether they should remove him from the ballot, I think many Americans will be looking tonight and thinking, this is our president. Can he do it for another 4 years? Even though both candidates are fairly old, I think there was a stark contrast between how Biden and Trump articulated their words, and particularly in these moments where Biden seemed to forget where he was or seemed to completely lose his sort of train of thought. I think many Americans will look at this last night and think, I can't believe he can do it for another 4 years.
And Steve, what was astonishing was that the debate, of course, on CNN, a very, very pro-Democrat station, historically very, very hostile towards Mr. Trump, their own team afterwards, it felt like a wake. Even Trump's advisors, chief of staff advisors who've worked with Joe Biden, who said that they love him as a man, are saying this was painful to watch. And so when you have the advisors, when you have the donors getting touchy, surely now there has to be some action, Steve.
I think that there is highly likely there might be some action from Democratic bigwigs. I think it depends how the opinion polls change over the coming weeks, whether this really does dent Biden's chances ahead of November. And of course, the Democrats can change their candidate. They haven't had their convention yet, which is where they choose their candidate for the election. So there is every possibility that last night was a historic moment in the election campaign. The election campaign here in the US really hasn't seen very much going on recently. I think most Americans have really clocked out. But I think last night, Joe Biden may be asleep, but I think Americans woke up to to the danger perhaps that he poses if he becomes president again in November for 4 years. I think he simply looked too old.
OK, Stephen Edgerton, thank you for joining us from America. And we'll come back to you for more reaction throughout the show as we go on. Thank you very much. And we're joined now by the campaign advisor, California Democratic Party, Bob Mulholland. Bob, welcome to the show. I don't know how much of that you overheard there, but we were trotting through the fact that senior donors of the Democratic Party and now Mark Buell saying, do we have time to put somebody else in there? Biden now only on a 21% chance of winning the presidential campaign if he stays as the nominee. The pollsters, his own team, are saying something needs to be done. What would you say to all of that?
Well, yes, Democrats did not have a great night, and we've seen media is ignoring all the mistakes that Trump made. But I do think 40 years ago, I watched the President Reagan debate, first debate with Mondale. Didn't go well for Reagan. The next day, all the pundits were saying, not all, but many of the pundits said, oh, maybe time to remove Reagan. Well, Reagan went on to win 49 states. President Obama in 2012 with Romney, first debate, again, didn't come out very well, and people started talking. Do we have a difficult election? Absolutely. But I think ultimately, in November 5th, the American people will see, hey, they're both older, but at least Biden is on our side. He's from the middle of Pennsylvania. He's from the middle of America. And he maybe doesn't do well in debates, but he's on our side. And I think ultimately that's our job as Democrats. I'm a Biden delegate. I will be at the national convention week of August 19th, and I will be voting for Biden and Harris.
You know, Bob, I admire your loyalty. I admire that sentiment. Undeniably, you know, Joe Biden loves his country. He's had a distinguished and long-standing career. But is it not surely time just to look at the evidence before your eyes and saying to do the right thing by the country, standing by your candidate blindly when all the evidence seems to show it will be the wrong choice? Is it not time to do the right thing, put the country first, and let somebody younger and more competent have a go?
If England in the Euro 2024 is behind in a quarter, they don't say we got to get out of the game. They keep going, and that's where we're going to go. We got several months to go. Lots of things could happen. Even Trump, you know, he's obese according to his own doctor. He could have health problems, and the voters will say, oh, both these guys aren't really ready. But ultimately on November 5th, it's between Biden and Trump. And I think we got a lot of clips last night of Trump. But I'll also mention this, that what if Trump last night couldn't remember his wife's name like happened a couple months ago? What if Trump last night said he beat Obama in the presidential race, which happened a couple of months ago? Would people today be saying, oh, we better get Trump out of there? Yes, we had a bad night, but we got a long way to go.
Yeah, but Bob Mulholland, CNN, I mean, a platform, a channel that's historically been very pro-Democrat, very anti-Donald Trump. It fact-checked so much of what Joe Biden said last night and showed he got things wrong time and time again. Had plenty of time to rehearse for this, plenty of time to get on point. But when it came down to it, in the white heat of the moment, you must admit it was a terrible, terrible night for Joe Biden and the Democratic Party.
Yeah, not a good night. As I've said, hey, the same fact checkers at CNN listed about 20 items that Trump missed it. And I would, as a veteran, I am very angry. I always have been angry at Trump for what he said about John McCain, who was a Republican U.S. Senator for 5-year prisoner of war in Hanoi, a war that I served in. And, you know, he called him a loser. And I was very happy with President Biden a couple of weeks ago going to Bellewood in France, a famous battle site for the U.S. Marines in World War I, which Trump refused to go. So there's lots of things to bring up in our television ads, our social media. And yes, we as Democrats are going to get hammered for a few days, but, you know, Trump could be coming out of his plane, fall down 4 steps, and people will be turning on that issue. It's a long way to go, and I'm ready to go for Biden.
But Bob Mulholland, you know, Joe Biden also said last night, I'm the only president where no servicemen have died on my watch, and 13 servicemen died in that disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. So he was fact-checked and was incorrect on that point too.
And Trump, in the 2016 campaign, promised the American people that the war in Afghanistan would be over in 2017, his first year. As he heard last night, he was going to end all the wars. Well, it turns out Trump dithered for 4 years, never ended the war, and then signed a one-sided deal with the Taliban terrorists to say we'll leave in 2021. Well, that was in the next administration that he planned. That was Trump's fault. But I will let your listeners know that about 68 American troops were killed during those 4 years of Trump dithering in Afghanistan. As a Vietnam vet, I understand wars. They're not easy. They're not, since World War II, they have not been like that, where there was kind of a gentleman's war. You got to Berlin and Tokyo, and there was peace agreements. Wars today are just go on and on and on. But Trump, and I think President Biden made this clear last night, Iran attacked an American base in Iraq. And Trump went on national TV as president and said that soldiers, our troops, only had headaches. Well, they were being evacuated. They were seriously injured, brain injuries. And Trump called them headaches. So as a veteran, I've never liked Trump because he skipped my war, paid some doctor to get out of it as a 4F. So I'm no fan of Trump. But I think the polls in the next couple of days will show we took a hit, but we've got a long way to go.
OK, thank you for joining us and thank you for being so open and forthright. It's very, very much appreciated. Campaign advisor, California Democratic Party, Bob Mulholland. Seriously, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Now, lots more on that story, of course, throughout the rest of the show, and there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com, and you've helped to make it the fastest-growing national news website in the country, so thank you very much. Now it's the final week to see how you could win our summer giveaway, 15 grand, tax-free cash and a whole host of treats on top. Now, lines close at 5 o'clock today, so you've got about an hour and 40 minutes to get in there. Don't miss out, and here's all the details that you need to enter.
It's the final week to see how you could win big this summer. First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Coming up, as Reform UK volunteers are filmed making offensive remarks in Clacton, and the Prime Minister, Nigel Farage, trade blows. Should all parties be more cautious in who they deploy to solicit their support? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Recent polling suggests dentistry has become the hardest NHS service for patients to access, within NHS treatments still 15% lower than pre-pandemic levels. So a YouGov survey reveals that more than 70% of Brits describe seeing the dentist as difficult, compared with 64% for GPs and 42% for A&E services. One British man, get this, he even took to flying 10,000 miles for dental care, saying the extra time and money spent was far less hassle than trying to get an appointment on the NHS. I mean, it's a sad state of affairs. And a shocking 1/5 of UK adults have also admitted to trying DIY dentistry, including the old trick of tying string around a wobbly tooth and slamming it in the door so it comes out. So, should people be more careful when taking their teeth into their own hands?
That is one of the problems. Obviously, population growth makes it much more difficult for people to access NHS services, but they need to then catch up on the other side with dental services and increase the amount of dentists and access to dentistry, and especially NHS dentistry, obviously.
What's the cut-off age for free dentistry on the NHS?
So it is 18 years old, but there are exemptions around maternity, pregnancy. There's some free care around pregnancy.
We saw some data a few weeks back about the number one cause for child admission into A&E is tooth decay. I mean, that was shocking when I read it.
It's really bad, and what happens is people, kids with multiple decayed teeth, they basically have to be put under general anaesthetic, and then all those rotted teeth have to be extracted under general anaesthetic. Like, if those baby teeth start going crooked, then the adult teeth start going crooked as well. Right. So it is important to look after the baby teeth. It's really important. I think they should make it more central to their policies, definitely.
The People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:26. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Rishi Sunak has responded to a Reform UK activist's comments caught on camera, referring to him as a racial slur, saying he is hurt and angry. And just a warning, this clip does contain censored, offensive remarks. Take a listen.
When my two daughters have to see and hear Reform people who campaign for Nigel Farage calling me an effing, it hurts and it makes me angry, and I think he has some questions to answer. When you see Reform candidates and campaigners seemingly using racist and misogynistic language and opinions, seemingly without challenge, I think it tells you something about the culture within the Reform Party. Our politics and country is better than that. It's my duty to call out this corrosive and divisive behaviour.
Well, Reform UK leader Nigel Farage has condemned the remarks as prejudiced and wrong, and said both recorded using the offensive language are not welcome on the party's campaign.
Well, there was an activist that said some pretty unpleasant things. Very, very prejudiced, very wrong. Mr Parker will not be welcome back, but hey, you know what? He's put a statement out already saying his views, he knows, are not mine. And Rob Bates said some silly things for which, and by the way, not offensive, but stupid things about the campaign, how it's being run. And George Jones expressed frustration about the police having pride flags on their cars.
But both those people, to be clear, won't be working with your campaign anymore.
All of us say silly things after a drink. It was very unwelcome.
Well, Mr Farage earlier today appeared on ITV's Loose Women, where he addressed the fallout over racism from Reform UK activists, claiming the entire operation was a set-up. And Channel 4 strenuously denied those allegations. Let's take a listen.
I saw all the footage last night. I thought no one speaks like that. It was just stream after stream of invective. No one speaks like that. He denied point blank that he was an actor. It turns out he is an actor. I found his website. He's a well-spoken actor. He was rough-speaking. He wasn't being himself from day one. I have to tell you, this whole thing is a complete and total setup. Of that, I have no doubt whatsoever.
Well, we have spoken to Channel 4 News and they say we strongly stand by a rigorous and duly impartial journalism which speaks for itself. We did not pay the Reform UK canvasser or anyone else in this report.
Well, joining me now is GB News' political correspondent, Catherine Forster. Catherine, welcome to the show. An astonishing situation. Mr Farage claiming the entire thing is a set-up. Channel 4 strenuously denying that.
Yes, that's right. Good afternoon, Martin. Yes, more bad headlines for the Reform Party and Nigel Farage. And this, of course, comes only a week since he really set the cat among the pigeons with his comments about the war in Ukraine, saying that the West had provoked Putin in that, which went down very badly with many. That story, again, is on the front page of The Telegraph today, because the Prime Minister has called Nigel Farage a Putin apologist. So, forgive me, just losing my earpiece. So today, I mean, this story broke last night about this campaigner in Clacton, these very, very offensive comments. And I think it's quite shocking, actually, isn't it, to see a clip of the Prime Minister speaking and using words which are so offensive that they have to be beeped out. But, you know, he said he'd said them because he wants to call this out. And, you know, totally offensive, of course, also factually incorrect. Rishi Sunak was born in Southampton. He is British and his parents are of Indian heritage, so wrong on absolutely every level. Now, Nigel Farage has made it very clear that this campaigner, Andrew Parker, is not welcome with Reform anymore. But, you know, this whole issue of was it a setup? Now, I've seen the clip where this man, who is a part-time actor, talks in a rather different sounding voice to the voice used in the clip, but worth saying, Channel 4 absolutely, completely deny this, and he has also denied it. He said, you know, this is just me, this is how I talk. So, you know, Nigel Farage now, of course, saying absolutely this is wrong, there's no place for this sort of attitude in the Reform Party, also saying that, you know, people who are racist are drawn to Reform because the British National Party, frankly, is no longer around, and Nigel Farage is saying that effectively, you know, he destroyed the British National Party and that sort of far-right faction in England. And that is why, you know, some people with very offensive views are drawn to Reform, but Nigel Farage very keen to disassociate himself. But I do think these are more damaging headlines for Reform, and of course the general election just a week away.
Okay, Catherine Forster, thank you very much for joining us on GB News. Always a pleasure to have your company. Now, a spokesperson for Channel 4 has given the following statement. We strongly stand by our rigorous and duly impartial journalism, which speaks for itself. We met Mr Parker for the first time at Reform UK's headquarters, where he was a Reform Party canvasser. We did not pay the Reform UK canvasser or anyone else in this report. Mr Parker was not known to Channel 4 News and was filmed covertly via the undercover operation. There's lots more still to come between now and 4 o'clock. And I'll be speaking to social policy analyst Rakib Hassan on whether this is an issue that affects all political parties, in fact, not just Reform. But first, it's your latest news headlines with Cameron Walker.
Thanks, Martin. It's 3:32. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says the leader of Reform UK has questions to answer after a video emerged of a campaigner making racist comments. Andrew Parker was recorded making a series of offensive remarks. He's now apologised but insists he was goaded into making them. The Prime Minister says it's part of a pattern of behaviour. A warning: the following clip contains some offensive language.
When my two daughters have to see and hear Reform people who campaign for Nigel Farage calling me an effing, it hurts and it makes me angry, and I think he has some questions to answer. When you see Reform candidates and campaigners seemingly using racist and misogynistic language and opinions, seemingly without challenge, I think it tells you something about the culture within the Reform Party. Our politics and country is better than that. It's my duty to call out this corrosive and divisive behaviour.
Well, earlier, Nigel Farage says that the comments have no place in the party and described the secretly recorded video as a setup.
Someone told us he was an actor. We rang him this morning, the Daily Telegraph rang him this morning. He denied point blank that he was an actor. It turns out he is an actor. I found his website. He's a well-spoken actor who does something called rough speaking. Well, I was in the office when he arrived last Saturday, and he was doing rough speaking. It was an act right from the very start.
So you met him?
I was working, and he came in and came up to me and said hello, and then he went out canvassing where the undercover filming took place. And he was rough speaking. He wasn't being himself from day one. I have to tell you, this whole thing is a complete and total setup.
Well, a spokesperson for Channel 4 says they strongly stand by the rigorous and duly impartial journalism. Meanwhile, police in Tenerife are calling for specialist volunteers to take part in a new large-scale search for a British teenager, Jay Slater, who went missing 12 days ago, and police have been scouring CCTV footage for his last known movements. The Spanish Civil Guard said in a statement that the latest search would begin at 9 o'clock local time tomorrow in the village of Masca. President Biden clashed with Donald Trump last night in the first televised debate in the race for the White House. With nearly 2 months to go until Biden's formally nominated as the Democrat nominee, the 81-year-old had hoped to build more support for his re-election. But the president often struggled last night to counter Donald Trump's style, allowing the former president to make several claims without being challenged. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2634 and €1.1803 euros. The price of gold is £1,844 and 10 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,191 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you, Cameron. Now, if you want to get in touch with us here at GB News, simply go to gbnews.com/your say, and I'll read out the best of your comments a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Thanks for joining me for the latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A bit of a north-south split with the weather today. Still quite blustery across parts of the north with a mixture of sunshine and showers thanks to this area of low pressure. Largely fine day in the south, but we do have to watch this area of low pressure coming in to mix things up a little for the weekend. But back to today, and plenty of showers packing in across western Scotland. Still very gusty here as well. A few showers will zip through across southern Scotland, northern England, maybe North Wales. Much of the south dry and fine though, with some decent spells of sunshine and a dry day compared to yesterday across Northern Ireland as well. In the sunny spells, we may squeak up to 22, 23, certainly a lot cooler than earlier in the week. Further north, feeling quite a bit cooler than the end of June, with temperatures in the high teens, but that brisk wind, particularly across northern Scotland. That will continue to ease through this evening, but still bring in a fair few showers over Caithness, Sutherland. The showers much more scattered further south, so much of the evening dry for southern Scotland and for Northern Ireland. The odd one still across northern England, but again, many places here will have a dry evening, and certainly across the south it's dry and fine, but it will start to cool off fairly rapidly through this evening. Then we look out west as that other area of low pressure starts to move in. That's going to bring more cloud as we go through the night across Wales and Northern Ireland, and eventually a little bit of light rain and drizzle. The showers will continue over Shetland and a few over the Highlands, but many places will have a dry night. Temperatures dipping down into single figures in a few spots. Quite a different day there tomorrow across Wales, especially on the west coast. Pretty drab rain and drizzle. Same goes for parts of northwest England again, particularly on the coast. Rain and drizzle likely to be on and off through the day here. A bit of patchy rain getting to northeast England. Still a few showers in the far north, but either side of that band of cloud and rain, many places will be dry and bright with some sunshine, and a touch warmer tomorrow in the southeast.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Slow traffic on the M62 eastbound in West Yorkshire due to an earlier accident between junction 26 Chainbar and 27 for Gildersham. Slow for the M6 southbound in Warwickshire. There's a lane closed there for an obstruction in the road between junction 4 Coles Hill and the Corley services, which are situated between junction 4 and junction 3. Severe delays on the M40 in Buckinghamshire northbound. It's been closed for a serious accident between junction 4, the High Wycombe Handycross roundabout, and 5 for Stokenchurch. Queues on the M1 northbound in Hertfordshire. It's due to an earlier obstruction in the road just after junction 8 Hemel Hempstead. Slow for the M11 northbound in Essex. It's partially blocked for a 5-vehicle accident just after junction 8 Bishop Stortford. And severe delays on the M5 northbound in Somerset. 2 lanes closed for a spillage of diesel just before junction 24 Bridgewater South.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 20 to 4. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, Rishi Sunak has responded to a Reform UK activist's comments caught on camera, referring to him as a racial slur, saying he is hurt and angry. Well, Nigel Farage today appeared on ITV's Loose Women, where he addressed the fallout over racism from Reform UK activists, claiming the entire operation was a setup. Now, Channel 4 has strangely denied those allegations. But I want to ask this question now. Should political parties be held responsible for their activists? And joining me now to discuss this is the social policy analyst, Dr. Rakib Hassan. Rakib, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. I want to ask the question. Andrew Parker is a grade A moron, right? We can all agree what he said was reprehensible. He's been kicked out of the organisation of Reform, and rightly so. I've taken part in quite a few elections in my time. I've been on the receiving end of all sorts of abuse. I've been on pro-Palestine marches. I've seen political candidates have cars driven at them. Green Party, Labour Party, the marchers. People say dodgy things all over the place in politics. My question is quite simple to you, Dr. Rakib Hassan. Should political party leaders be held responsible for everything that anybody says within their party?
I think that political leaders have a responsibility to condemn blatantly racist statements, which may be made by campaigners affiliated to that party. And they also have to act robustly when their parliamentary candidates say bigoted things. And I think that the issue here is that we had a Channel 4 undercover investigation into the Reform Party. I wonder if they are also carrying out similar activity for other political parties. And if not, why is it the case they've been so selective? I think that more generally, Martin, I make this point that this general election was announced very abruptly by the Prime Minister. And one of my initial reactions was that we were going to have a number of candidate-related scandals, because I felt that those vetting procedures, they wouldn't be carried out in such a thorough way. And it seems like I may have had a point.
And you also mentioned something fascinating on social media last night. That is, you mentioned in your hometown of Luton, if some undercover reporting was done on the streets of Luton, then we might find something rather unsavoury coming out of certain communities.
You wouldn't need any undercover reporting for that, Martin. They say it to you directly. Luton's known for having many residents, various walks of life. They don't have much of a social filter, and they don't have much time for political correctness either. So I think that the point is people have very controversial views across a variety of topics. I think that what is that political leaders have to take responsibility in terms of pushing back on those opinions if they're expressed by those who are affiliated to their own party. And I think that more generally, when it comes to parliamentary candidates, if it's found that they have made very questionable statements on social media, when I mean questionable, statements which are very clearly racist, bigoted towards particular racial and religious groups, then political leaders have a responsibility to act robustly in those situations.
And that has happened in this instance. Andrew Parker is now history. I think we can all agree that's the right thing to do. But we've also seen recently Green Party councillors crying Allah Akbar when they were elected. We've seen terrible anti-Semitism within the Labour Party. I wonder if we'll see an undercover sting on those political parties, Rakib.
Well, if we do, it won't be Channel 4 behind it, but put it that way. I think that, more generally, I think that when we look at British politics, by the way, I'd say overall our political environment is far more favourable than other European countries, for example. And I think when you see the degree of political polarisation in the United States, I do think that we are in better shape. That's not to say that improvements can't be made in the British context. But I think overall, when we're looking at this particular situation where there are blatantly racist comments made towards the Prime Minister, I think there's also some very worrying statements which emerged from the investigation which amounted to incitement to violence, talking about young army recruits being sent to the south coast to shoot illegal migrants. However conservative your views are on illegal migration, that is totally unacceptable. But I think that my point is you would find unacceptable characters in a variety of political organisations. And I think that whether it's Channel 4 or any other channel, I think they also have a responsibility to challenge and expose those views, irrespective of which organisations those views are within.
Common sense, as ever spoken. Thanks for joining us on the show. That's the social policy analyst, Dr. Rakib Hassan. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, to repeat, a spokesperson for Channel 4 has said this statement: "We strongly stand by our rigorous and duly impartial journalism, which speaks for itself. We met Mr Parker for the first time at Reform UK's headquarters, where he was a Reform Party canvasser. We did not pay the Reform UK canvasser or anyone else in this report. Mr Parker was not known to Channel 4 News and was filmed covertly via the undercover operation." Now, coming up, the latest in the hunt for Jay Slater as undercover sleuths hit the island. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
So, question is, what can we do to get young people to eat healthy food? Here's dietitian and nutrition consultant Helen Bond. Helen, what do you think?
Eating habits formed at this age tend to persist into later life. You know, we're eating too much fat, sugar, salt, and not enough of the good things like fibre, you know, fruits and vegetables, all of those things. So yes, we need to help this age group so they have the skill set and they have the nutrition knowledge to take that forward.
Do you agree that it is impossible to eat healthily on a budget and quickly as well, or do you have any sort of fail-safe, affordable and very quick to prep meals that you'd recommend youngsters try?
It doesn't have to be expensive either, but you have to have those kind of cost-cutting hacks and those time-saving things in the kitchen. You know, make use, I always say, of things like peas, beans and lentils, which they're a type of pulse, very inexpensive compared to meat, and yet they double up as one of your 5 a day, and also a great source of plant-based protein. You know, if you overget milk as something, you have too much milk, maybe make some lattes.
I just wanted to throw a shoe at the TV, really, because was there nothing else on or nothing else available? The point being, There is an audience. There is obviously an appeal. There's obviously people are watching this stuff. So what are they doing? Are they watching and not cooking?
I think that's it. They're watching and maybe enjoying all the cookery programs like I do. And I'm a typical person in the kitchen. I must have about 100 cookbooks. But sometimes when you are time poor, you know, you've got to feed a family or you've got to feed yourself and everything. You don't really know where to start. And I think that's why apps and having things online for this younger audience makes it much more accessible. Start with one recipe and build it up from there. Like I said,
The People's Channel.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party. Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's TRIC Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 3:49. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, police in Tenerife are calling for volunteers to take part in a new large-scale search for missing British teenager Jay Slater in Tenerife. The Spanish Civil Guard said in a statement that the search would begin at 9 a.m. local time on Saturday in the village of Masca, near to his last known location. And meanwhile, the mother of the missing teenager says some of the money raised by a crowdfunding appeal will be withdrawn to help with that search. And the appeal has raised over £40,000 so far. Well, let's find out now from more with the senior global reporter at Mail Online, Nick Pizzo, who joins us from Tenerife. Nick, welcome back to the show. You've been covering this story since day one, 12 days in. What more do we know? An astonishing revelation that tourists are now flocking to the last known apartment of Jay Slater and performing ghoulish searches in search of selfies as well. Bring us up to speed.
Yes, well, you can probably see behind me now, this is the terrain that the police are looking for Jay in. You can see it's quite steep, it's quite rugged. It is actually quite a bit of a wilderness here. There's just cacti behind me, and the trails are very difficult to see. And if we pan over here, just to my left, you can actually see the Airbnb where Jay was staying when he sent a snapshot to his two friends saying that he'd been driven up here by his friends, some two guys that he'd met down in Playa Americas at the after party at Papagayo's nightclub. They came up here and he then left this house, walked up the mountain, saying that he was going to try and get back to the apartment where he was staying with his friends because he'd missed the last bus. And we now know that that didn't happen. But as you say, yes, this place has now started to attract, I think, a little bit dark tourists. People are just coming up here, having a look at the scene, taking photographs, taking selfies. And to a certain degree, the Spanish police are saying that this noise, if you like, that's what they're calling it, this interference is actually hampering with their investigation. Although at the same time, they have appealed for volunteers, as you said in your introduction there, to come here tomorrow at 9 a.m. to start a mass search of this area. But they are specifically saying they don't want just anybody to come. They want people who are experienced in hiking across this sort of terrain. And the key thing they are saying is that you must register if you turn up here because they don't want to be looking for these people themselves later on tomorrow afternoon.
And isn't that the danger here, though, Nick? We've got a lot of TikTok detectives who want to come along for the ride, for the glamour. And as you say, the Civil Guard are saying they want people who are competent in mountain rescue. I guess that rules out most tourists who just want to come along and, I don't know, have a bit of a tourist adventure.
Well, you'd like to think so, Martin, because as I say, this terrain is actually very difficult to search through and to trek through. It's, as I say, the trails aren't marked. Today is actually one of the first days when it's actually quite warm up here. The last week or so, it's actually been quite chilly with a bit of a breeze. So you don't just want anyone coming up here and putting on their hiking gear and their boots, strapping on a rucksack and strolling along through here. You need to know what you're doing. I say otherwise you're going to perhaps need rescuing yourself by those authorities as well. Just to go back on those TikTokers and internet sleuths as well, they are really having an effect on the family. They've told me that they just cannot bear to look at social media because of some of the stuff that's been posted on there, and some of the stuff is actually quite vile and abusive to them. And what I would say to those people is, look, just stop, pause, have a think. Would you say something like this to your own son, nephew, whatever, if they were missing? It's just not on, really.
And Nick, briefly, if we could, also this fundraiser of over £40,000 has been raised. The mother, Debbie Duncan, has withdrawn some of that money. That's caused a few eyebrows to raise this side of the water.
Yes, that's right. What is amazing about that GoFundMe page is that the initial target was £30,000, and that was reached within 3 days. It's a hell of a lot of money. And now we know that it's got more than £40,000 in it. And as you say, Debbie made a post on that Facebook page yesterday saying that they were in talks with GoFundMe to withdraw some of that cash to help pay for their expenses whilst out here, for accommodation, for food, that sort of thing, and also so they could have the support of loved ones from back home who could come and join them. But they said they also want to donate to the mountain rescue services up here, who are all volunteers, to help pay for the cost of them being searching in these mountains behind me.
OK, Nick Pisa, senior global reporter at Mail Online, thank you for that superb and comprehensive update live from Tenerife. Thank you very much. Now, coming up after Joe Biden's car crash debate performance last night, is there now any hope left for the Democratic Party? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. We'll have full reaction from over there in America. It's an astonishing night. DEFCON 1 moment, it's being called, and people, donors, pulling out of the party, saying we need a new candidate. We must go on without Joe Biden. We'll have a full update after this. Now, time for your weather, though, with Alex Deakin.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A fresher feel out there, certainly compared to earlier in the week. Many of us having a fine end to the working week. It's just not particularly warm. And it's still quite gusty across northern Scotland. Plenty of showers packing in here. 1 or 2 showers across southern Scotland and northern England through the evening and overnight. But most places will be dry. Some lengthy clear spells in the east, but it will cloud over further west during the early hours. Staying quite warm under that clouds, but with some clearer skies, we'll easily see temperatures dropping down into single figures. Still quite breezy in northern Scotland on Saturday. A few showers here, but much of Scotland dry and fine with some good spells of sunshine, and plenty of sunshine across the south as well. A fine day to come for East Anglia and the southeast. But in these more central parts, so through Wales, northern England, much more cloud, and there will be some rain and drizzle too, particularly to the west of northern England and across the north and the west of Wales. Some brighter skies across the north of Northern Ireland. Sunny spells for most of Scotland, but there will be more showers packing in across the far north. Not as windy here as today, but still a noticeable and fairly chilly breeze. The clouds should tend to drift away from Northern Ireland through the day, so Belfast brightening up through the morning along with parts of southern Scotland, but much of northwest England, north and west Wales likely to stay fairly drab. Some rain and drizzle, especially over coasts and hills, and cooler here as a result. But some warmth across the southeast, 24, maybe 25 Celsius. Only high teens further north, but still feeling pleasant in the sunshine. By the time we get to Sunday, the cloud and the rain and drizzle will have slipped further south, so a grey start across the southeast, but it should brighten up here. 1 or 2 showers here and there, some rain in Shetland, but for many Sundays dry. Quite a lot of cloud, but I think we'll still see some sunny spells coming through, but still on the cool side for most, with temperatures generally only in the high teens. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. We're seeing queuing traffic near Falkirk. Firstly, M876 southbound very slow at the intersection with the M80 at junction 8, and then further along the M80 southbound it's very slow at junction 7 for Hags. Severe delays on the M40 northbound in Buckinghamshire due to an earlier accident between the High Wycombe Handycross roundabout at junction 4 and junction 5 for Stokenchurch. Queues on the M1 northbound in Hertfordshire, 2 lanes closed for a broken down vehicle just after junction 8 for Hemel Hempstead. Estimated travel time around 20 minutes. Also slow on the M1 southbound in Bedfordshire due to an earlier 3-vehicle accident just after junction 11A for Dunstable. And severe delays on the M5 northbound in Somerset due to a diesel spillage just before junction 24 Bridgewater South. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
It's the final week to see how you can win big this summer. First, there's a totally tax-free £15,000 in cash to make your summer spectacular. Spend that extra cash however you like. You'll also win a brand new iPhone, Apple AirPods, and if that wasn't enough, a £500 voucher to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry, as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats, and £15,000 cash, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
As time passes, she could have said stump. You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
It went everywhere. Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different. Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very, very good afternoon to you and a very happy Friday. It's 4 p.m. and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, is it time for Joe to go? Because after Joe Biden's disastrous TV debate with Donald Trump last night, described as a car crash, and the Democrats' DEFCON 1 moments, top donors are today demanding the president stands aside for a younger candidate. But who might that be? And can anybody stop Donald Trump? Just Stop Soup. Our 6 top organisers of Just Stop Oil are nicked at an East London soup night, while the police finally getting tough on climate fanatics. I'll be joined by one of them in the studio later to discuss it. And a right royal return, because Princess Anne leaves hospital today, and could another royal return to the spotlight as speculation grows that the Princess of Wales could attend Wimbledon next week to hand out trophies. How wonderful that would be. And an astonishing story as a 12-year-old Jewish boy was visited by a Prevent Counterterrorism officer and the police after he posted on social media, "I want to see Hamas obliterated." And then they tried to confiscate his wooden toy crossbow that apparently had the power of a potato gun. We'll speak to the activist who's helping the boy to get justice. And that's all coming in your next hour. What's the show? Always a delight to have your company. What a TV debate that was last night between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. Been called a car crash, a medical emergency, not a night at all. A night to forget for Joe Biden. Well, many saying he already probably has. And this side of the pond, the furore over the Reform Party activist who's been booted out of the party rumbles on. Rishi Sunak issued an emotional response to that. Nigel Farage on the counter-offensive. We'll have a full update on the political stories that are gripping us both sides of the pond. Get in touch the usual way, gbnews.com/you'll say. But before we kick into the next hour, it's your headlines with Cameron Walker.
Martin, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 4. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says the leader of Reform UK has questions to answer after a video emerged of a campaigner making racist comments. Andrew Parker was seen making a series of offensive remarks about Rishi Sunak. He's now apologised but insists he was goaded into making them. Rishi Sunak says it's part of a broader pattern of behaviour, a warning the following clip contains some offensive language.
When my two daughters have to see and hear Reform people who campaign for Nigel Farage calling me an effing, it hurts and it makes me angry, and I think he has some questions to answer. When you see Reform candidates and campaigners seemingly using racist and misogynistic language and opinions, seemingly without challenge, I think it tells you something about the culture within the Reform Party. Our politics and country is better than that. It's my duty to call out this corrosive and divisive behaviour.
Well, the video was obtained by Channel 4 News. They've rigorously defended the clip's authenticity, but Reform UK's leader, Nigel Farage, described it as a setup.
Someone told us he was an actor. We rang him this morning, the Daily Telegraph rang him this morning. He denied point blank that he was an actor. It turns out he is an actor. I found his website. He's a well-spoken actor who does something called rough speaking. Well, I was in the office when he arrived last Saturday, and he was doing rough speaking. It was an act right from the very start.
So you've met him?
I was working, and he came in and came up to me and said hello, and then he went out canvassing where the undercover filming took place. And he was rough speaking. He wasn't being himself from day one. I have to tell you, this whole thing is a complete and total setup.
Well, in a statement, a spokesperson for Channel 4 says they strongly stand by what they called rigorous and duly impartial journalism, which they say speaks for itself. Well, to other news now, and police in Tenerife are calling for specialist volunteers to take part in a new large-scale search for a missing British teenager. Jay Slater went missing 12 days ago, and police have been scouring CCTV footage for his last known movements. The Spanish Civil Guard said in a statement that the latest search would begin at 9 o'clock local time tomorrow morning in the village of Masca. They're asking for volunteers with experience as fire crews and professional search and rescue. The Met Police says a total of 27 Just Stop Oil supporters have been arrested in a coordinated raid after the group threatened to disrupt summer holidays. 4 people were arrested on Tuesday after being identified at Gatwick Airport and have since been released on bail. It also comes after 6 members of the group, some described as being key organisers, were arrested in Hackney in East London last night. Now, HSBC is the latest bank to apologise to customers after some were locked out of their online banking. Many people encountered difficulties on what's commonly payday for workers across the country. It comes after other high street banks saw glitches, with Virgin Money and Nationwide also apologising to their customers. To the US now, and President Biden clashed with Donald Trump last night in the first televised debate in the race for the White House. With nearly 2 months to go until Biden's formally nominated as the Democrat nominee, the 81-year-old had hoped to build more support for his re-election. But the president often struggled to counter Donald Trump, allowing the former president to make a series of claims without being challenged. Rather than quashing concerns about his age, Joe Biden's stilted and shaky performance has reignited concerns within the Democratic Party over whether he ought to be their nominee.
Eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President.
In royal news, Princess Anne has returned home after several days in hospital with minor injuries and concussion. The 73-year-old is believed to have been struck by a horse while walking on her Gatcombe Park estate in Gloucestershire on Sunday evening. Her husband, Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, has thanked the team at Southmead Hospital in Bristol for their care, expertise and kindness. And a house in Los Angeles where Marilyn Monroe lived and tragically died has been saved from demolition. It comes after the Brentwood home was bought by a couple who lived in a neighbouring property who plans to replace it with an extension. The City Council has now voted unanimously to declare the Spanish colonial-style home a historical landmark, which prevents any substantial alterations. It was the only house ever owned by the Hollywood icon. She lived there for 6 months until her death in 1962. Well, those are the latest stories on GB News. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Now, after a decidedly rocky debate performance last night, senior figures in the Democratic Party are now contemplating removing Joe Biden as the party's presumptive nominee and replacing him with somebody else at the party's August convention. Well, Joe Biden appeared confused at times in the debate, and let's take a quick look at one of those moments.
Eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
It just gets worse the more you watch it. And we're joined now by a former advisor to the Clinton and Bush administrations, Steve Gill. Steve, always a pleasure to have your company. An astonishingly bad night by anybody's reckoning, even CNN, a very pro-Biden poll, their own poll afterwards said 67% believe Trump won. Another poll in the Daily Mail, 68% don't think Biden should stand, including 41% of people who voted for the guy in 2020. Steve, you've spoken into the ears of presidents past and present. What would you say to Joe Biden this morning, the morning after the night before?
I think words like catastrophe and disaster really don't tell the real story of how bad it was. I think that if it's not happening right now, it will happen soon. You'll have, President Obama, you'll have President Clinton go and have the hard conversation with Joe Biden that many of us who've had elderly parents and have to ask for them to give us their car keys. It's not a pleasant conversation, but it's time for Joe to give up the car keys, whether it's as the nominee or whether it's as president. To me, beyond the political implications of the horrific performance, is that this man is president of the United States, that he is the leader of the free world. He has his finger on the nuclear button. He is incapable of doing the job, and they need to remove him from the position of power, not just the political prospects.
And Steve, what's happening right now is that donors, major donors, are getting itchy feet. They're thinking, what's the point putting our money behind this man? Mark Buell has just said, do we have time to put somebody else out there? One advisor to the Democratic Party has just said to Politico, our only hopes is that he either bows out, so we have a brokered convention, or he dies. Is it really as bad as that?
I think it is. And the problem is that the logistics of removing him as president, they can invoke the 25th Amendment. They can say he's mentally incompetent, and that makes Kamala Harris president. How is she then not the Democrat nominee for president? If they have a brokered convention, are they going to throw the black woman out and think that they're going to keep their black base? The logistics of doing this and the timeline of making any change is so narrow. Now, you have the Biden team today saying he is not going anywhere, he is staying in, and he's looking forward to the September debate. But that's usually what people say just before they bow out.
Now, Steve, a lot of people have been asking questions for a long time about Joe Biden's mental wherewithal. They were shot down as ageist or right-wing or conspiracy theorists, but this wasn't a great surprise to those of us who've been watching this closely. Why do you think it is, though, Steve Gill, that there seems to be a peculiar type of blindness about this within the Democratic organisation itself? Is it because they're so anti-Donald Trump, they're so determined to stand by their man no matter what the costs, they may have put the entire party and the country in peril?
You know, I think part of it is just the Trump derangement syndrome. They hate Donald Trump more than they love America. I think the other is those in the inner circle that have power don't want to lose power. And frankly, they see the real Joe Biden. The 16 people who were preparing him, they knew what was coming. They've seen what was coming for months while they've said behind the scenes, he's sharp as a knife. He's not as sharp as those rounded scissors kindergartners use. And Jill Biden, his wife, ought to be prosecuted for elder abuse because she, better than anybody else, knows the truth. And yet they have continued this facade to keep themselves in power. And that is despicable.
Now, Steve, there was a particularly haunting moment last night at the very, very end of the debate when the First Lady was helping Joe Biden off the stage. And can't we just all agree, this isn't funny anymore? This isn't something that's worthy of even mocking. It looks really, really unfair. It looks like a person, to many, many people, Steve Gill, that he shouldn't be put out there like this. It almost looks cruel.
Yeah, and I think that some are pushing back at Trump, saying, you know, he was too mean to this doddering old man. Keep in mind that his own Justice Department has decided not to prosecute him because he's incompetent to be able to stand trial, but he's still president of the United States. I think it is cruel that his inner circle is keeping him in a position that is destroying any remaining integrity or credibility that he might have just as they try to hold on to power. And yet you see this guy, you see him being helped off the stage, can barely walk, can barely talk. And yet we're to believe, as he claimed last night, he has a 6 handicap in golf. This guy can't walk upstairs, much less up a golf course.
Now, Steve Gill, briefly, if we could, Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, is being tipped as the most likely candidate to succeed Biden if that happens. But here's a man not without his own problems. Only 44% of Californians like him, and he's left the state $38 billion in debt.
And when we talk about personal attacks on Trump, keep in mind that Gavin Newsom slept with his campaign manager's wife, had to go in rehab for drugs. There's a whole sordid story there. Again, the logistics of how you move Kamala aside, how you move him in, how you do it in a very quick way. Keep in mind, hundreds of thousands, millions of people have voted in the Democrat primaries for Joe Biden to be their nominee. Now they're going to have a handful go into a dark room and throw him out. That's the democracy that they want us to defend? That sounds more like Zelensky canceling elections. This is not democracy at work, and Americans ought to be appalled.
OK, Steve Gill, it's always a pleasure to have your expert insight, a former advisor there to the Clinton and Bush administrations. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, we'll have lots more on that story, of course, at 5 o'clock, and there's plenty of coverage on our website, gbnews.com. You've helped to make it the fastest-growing national news website in the country, so thank you very much. Now it's the final day to see how you could win our summer giveaway. 15 grand, tax-free cash and a whole host of goodies on top. Now, lines close at 5 o'clock, so you've got just under 45 minutes to make sure that you don't miss out. Here's all the details that you need to enter.
It's the final week to see how you could win big this summer. First, there's a fabulous £15,000 in tax-free cash to ensure this summer is special. What would you spend that on? Next, you'll also receive the latest iPhone 15 and a set of Apple AirPods. And finally, £500 to spend at your favourite UK attraction. You have to hurry as lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. For another chance to win the iPhone, treats and £15,000 cash, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. You can also enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2 or post your name and number to GB06 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on Friday. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Coming up, an exclusive GB News Investigates stories. We report on a 12-year-old Jewish boy been investigated after social media posts by counter-terrorism officers. You couldn't make it up. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Wiltshire police have arrested 2 people after they sprayed orange paint on Stonehenge.
Well, Just Stop Oil have shared a video saying it's to get the incoming government to sign up to a legally binding treaty to phase out fossil fuels by 2030. Of course, Stonehenge famously associated with oil, gas. I think the 5,000-year-old Neolithic Britons were prolific users of the internal combustion engine, and they drilled for lots of oil, so it makes perfect sense, of course.
Yes, we're going to be joined by Jill Taylor, a spokesperson from Just Stop Oil. Jill, thank you very much indeed. What on earth is this all about? This is just criminal activity under the guise of some kind of activism.
No, that's not. That paint will be washed off really easily. So it's not long-lasting damage at all. Unlike the damage that is being done now by the fossil fuel industry and just keeping burning fossil fuels, putting more CO2 into the atmosphere. You're right, the Neolithic people were not prolific users of fossil fuels. They did not cause the kind of damage that we're causing now. That's all been within since the Industrial Revolution in the 150 years.
So because
this is when the damage has been done.
So because this stuff can be washed off, ergo there's no issue here. Well, Stonehenge aren't particularly happy about this. They've come out on their social media page and they say Stonehenge is protected by the Ancient Monuments Act and it is a criminal offence to damage the stones. There are also multiple rare lichen species growing on the stones that are also protected. So this isn't good for nature, is it?
I think you're getting things so out of perspective here. What isn't good for nature is the damage we're doing now, and what's not good for nature globally is not good for you, it's not good for me, and it's not good for the people watching this program.
The People's Channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's TRIC Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Welcome back. It's coming up to 4:20. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, the fallout from the so-called reform racism row has continued, with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak saying the offensive remarks made a Reform UK canvasser about him both hurt and angered him. Well, Reform UK's leader Nigel Farage has condemned the comments made by Andrew Parker, but claims that they were a set-up. Well, let's discuss this further now with the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office Minister, Anne-Marie Trevelyan. Welcome to the show, Anne-Marie. So let's start off on this rather unsavoury story of the Reform activist who's now been kicked out of the party. What's your take on this episode?
Well, I mean, the whole thing is just appalling. It's so depressing that any political party doesn't vet their people well enough to find out their views and the likelihood of them sharing these vile comments. I'm glad the Prime Minister was given a chance to give his view, and I think I know him well, and I think he will have been hurt, but also angry, and not only for himself, but for all those who give so much to our great nation by virtue of their efforts, their skills, nothing to do with their family heritage.
It's a difficult job for any political party to stay on top of every single person who gets involved on a street level. As you know yourself, people come and go in politics all the time. Are you satisfied? We can all agree that this guy's been kicked out of the party, grade A moron. People like that have no place in the political hemisphere whatsoever. Are you satisfied, though, that Nigel Farage done the right thing and just got rid of him as quickly as possible?
Yes, I'm pleased to see that he has done that. That man will, of course, still be on the ballot paper because that's how it works for us as candidates. Once the nominations are closed, you are the name on the ballot until such time as the election is called. So it's not quite as straightforward as that. But yes, it's good to see that he has at least demonstrated some clarity of purpose there. But it's just unacceptable that people think those sorts of comments are in any way appropriate in the modern political environment. We are a genuinely fantastic multi-faith, multicultural society, and to think that people like that think there's a place in modern politics is just profoundly depressing.
Yeah, and of course, we've seen allegations too. We've seen Green Party councillors shouting Allah Akbar. We've seen all sorts of anti-Semitism within the Labour Party as well. But let's move on now, if we can, to education. And the Conservative Party launching your education plan today. Tell us more.
So I think it's continuing, obviously, the enormously good work that we've done over the last 14 years. We had very low numbers of good or outstanding schools when we came into office back in 2010, and now 9 out of 10 are good or outstanding. That level of commitment, the incredible change that we've seen, the investment by our amazing teachers. I've got fantastic schools up here in Northumberland where, you know, the challenges are not always the same across the country, but we've had teachers who have really taken the direction that Boris said, and going forwards, that continued investment that we've set out will be key. What really worries me is that some of Labour's class war attacks on particularly independent schools education risks creating problems not only for those children whose parents have made a separate choice for often many reasons, particularly around special educational needs, but also for those schools that are already full. So what Conservatives will continue to do is invest and grow, particularly personally, it's very important to me around the special educational needs. I have a child now grown up who needed that support, and to see that, and I just, you know, I worry that we risk seeing surrendering to Labour that incredible loss of all those huge improvements that we've seen. Best reading for children in the Western world now, number 11 in maths globally. These are incredible improvements that our kids and our teachers have made, and we want to see that continue.
And Anne-Marie, I know you have to dash in a minute, but I need to ask you about, are you concerned about the direction of travel, particularly around gender ideology? And if we do see a change of government, do you think we could see some worrying things creeping into schools about what our children are taught about gender?
So we've obviously set out very clearly as Conservative we would continue and bring in the work that we started, that Gillian Keegan, as our Secretary of State for Education, has led on, making sure a number of things, obviously within the conversation around identifying biological sex within the Equalities Act, but within schools to make sure that parents can see everything that their children are being taught. That is so important, that transparency, that connection between the school and what they're helping your child to learn and develop, and the parents' responsibility as well in that education process. We need that transparency, and I do worry that Labour are not proposing to continue the great work that Gillian has set up in that. And I want to make sure that all our kids and our parents know exactly what they're learning.
Excellent stuff. Thanks for joining us on the show. Pleasure to have your company. Anne-Marie Trevelyan, thank you very much indeed. Now, moving on, a 12-year-old Jewish boy is under investigation by counter-terrorism officers after he said that he wanted Hamas to be wiped out. GBNews can reveal this story because the boy's family, who have requested anonymity, of course, have been interviewed by counter-terrorism police and local police officers about a fear of radicalisation after his comments about Hamas. It's an astonishing story, and to talk about it, I'm joined by GBNews reporter Charlie Peters, who investigated this story. Charlie, a 12-year-old Jewish boy, hardly al-Qaeda. Tell us more.
Well, this boy, we understand, was reported to Prevent, the government's counter-extremism duty and body, by the safeguarding lead at his school. We understand the family's from South Tyneside. We're not identifying the school or the family. But this report was made after the teacher asked this boy, just 12 years old, is there anything in the news that's upsetting you at the moment? And he's understood to have said, yes, Hamas, reacting to the war ongoing between Israel and Hamas in the West Bank, etc., and is then understood to have been saying that he wants them to be wiped out. Now, Hamas, we should stress, is a proscribed terrorist organisation. The government's position on this is that it should be destroyed, it should suffer. But as it happens, the report from the family is that this was then passed on to those counter-extremism officers. And we've heard an audio recording of a police officer and a counter-extremism officer interviewing the boy's parents alongside a representative from Faircop called Harry Miller. Now, he's assessed this case and he's representing and supporting the family as they say that this is an overreach and an unacceptable use of police powers to interfere with quite legitimate speech. Now, in other areas where they've sought to present this boy as potentially being radicalised, the officers have also referred to footage posted online of the boy holding a toy crossbow. We have some footage that we can show you now of the boy, just 12, holding a crossbow. It's from national heritage. It's a toy, I should stress. It's not something that could injure anyone. But the parents are understood to have been asked by the police in an interview at their home whether or not, because of this crossbow, if they had any air rifles at home, did they had any knives? So they were asking whether or not they had weapons in the household. They also went on to ask questions about the views in the household on the situation in Israel. Is this potentially a situation where the parents are radicalising their child? So all very controversial. Some of it reportedly stems from the child being bullied at school, facing some appalling taunts based on the fact that he's Jewish, asking him in the PE changing room if the showers there remind him of the gas chambers. That's what his mother told us, saying that he's been facing that sort of taunting and abuse. Now, teachers, she say, would have been able to have heard that, and they've also alleged, this family, that the school have been duped by these bullies. They're passing on and misreporting this child's comments in order to get him in trouble, and that's where Prevent, the counter-extremism body, has intervened.
That's a toy crossbow. We saw it on the screen there, could barely knock a tin can off a wall. He's undergone comments at school. He's gone on social media. He's 12. He's a 12-year-old boy saying he wants a proscribed terrorist organisation to be eradicated, which, by the way, is the position of most Western governments. Why on earth are counter-terrorism cops getting involved?
Sure, this isn't necessarily the kind of space they could and should be getting involved with. But I think it's worth looking at the story through the perspective and in the knowledge and the context of the Shawcross review into Prevent last year. Now, this was a government-mandated review of the government's counter-extremism duty, and it found, according to Sir William Shawcross, he made 34 recommendations, but he said that Prevent had lost its way. It had failed to adequately identify the real extremist risks in society. All too often, it was prosecuting those who were not deserving of prosecution, and it had missed legitimate and serious targets. He also said in a response to a progress report released earlier this year in February that he felt as though Britain had become less safe since the Israel-Hamas war started and that the government was not sufficiently targeting Hamas sympathisers. I've spoken to several groups involved in this sort of oversight. UK Lawyers for Israel told me that all too often the government's not sufficiently prosecuting Hamas sympathisers, and at the same time they're going after a kid who says that they should be wiped out. That's a proscribed terrorist organisation. Surely that's the view of the state.
Charlie Peters, it's an astonishing story, but well done for bringing it to our attention. Thank you for joining me here in the studio. And I have a joint statement here from Northumbria Police and Counterterrorism Policing North East, who said this: "We are unable to discuss individual cases or identify anyone who may or may not be the subject of a Prevent referral. All referrals are treated in the strictest confidence and will always prioritise the safety and welfare of those concerned. Prevent is a multi-agency approach to safeguarding and supporting those most at risk of radicalisation through early intervention. It seeks to protect young and vulnerable people against all forms of extremist activity, regardless of ideology. As a force, Northumbria Police is committed to supporting its diverse communities. We make it our mission to forge strong relationships, and we are here to offer support wherever it is needed. Well, I'll be joined by Harry Miller, the founder of FairCop, about 5:15 to discuss this in more detail. Thank you very much, Charlie. And there's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock as police nick 6 Just Stop Oil activists at a soup night. Or the police finally cracking down on the climate fanatics. I'll be joined by one of them soon. Hopefully they won't have any soup on them. But first is your latest news headlines with Cameron Walker.
Martin, thank you. It's 4:31. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says the leader of Reform UK has questions to answer after a video emerged of a campaigner making racist comments. Andrew Parker was seen making a series of offensive remarks about Rishi Sunak. He's now apologised but insists he was goaded into making them. Rishi Sunak says it's part of a broader pattern of behaviour. A warning: the following clip contains some offensive language.
When my 2 daughters have to see and hear Reform people who campaign for Nigel Farage calling me an effing, it hurts and it makes me angry, and I think he has some questions to answer. When you see Reform candidates and campaigners seemingly using racist and misogynistic language and opinions, seemingly without challenge, I think it tells you something about the culture within the Reform Party. Our politics and country is better than that. It's my duty to call out this corrosive and divisive behaviour.
Well, Nigel Farage said earlier that the comments have no place in the party and describes the secretly recorded video as a setup.
Someone told us he was an actor. We rang him this morning, the Daily Telegraph rang him this morning. He denied point blank that he was an actor. It turns out he is an actor. I found his website. He's a well-spoken actor who does something called rough speaking. Well, I was in the office when he arrived last Saturday, and he was doing rough speaking. It was an act right from the very start.
So you've met him?
I was working, and he came in and came up to me and said hello, and then he went out canvassing where the undercover filming took place. And he was rough speaking. He wasn't being himself from day one. I have to tell you, this whole thing is a complete and total setup.
Well, in a statement, a spokesperson for Channel 4 said they strongly stand by what they call rigorous and duly impartial journalism, which they say speaks for itself. Meanwhile, police in Tenerife are calling for specialist volunteers to take part in a new large-scale search for a British teenager. Jay Slater went missing 12 days ago, and police have been scouring CCTV footage for his last known movements. The Spanish Civil Guard said in a statement that the latest search would begin at 9 o'clock local time tomorrow in the village of Masca. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Now, if you want to get in touch, simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay, and I'll read out the best of your comments a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Afternoon, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A fresher feel out there, certainly compared to earlier in the week. Many of us having a fine end to the working week. It's just not particularly warm. And it's still quite gusty across northern Scotland. Plenty of showers packing in here. 1 or 2 showers across southern Scotland and northern England through the evening and overnight. But most places will be dry. Some lengthy clear spells in the east, but it will cloud over further west during the early hours. Staying quite warm under that clouds, but with some clearer skies, we'll easily see temperatures dropping down into single figures. Still quite breezy in northern Scotland on Saturday. A few showers here, but much of Scotland dry and fine with some good spells of sunshine and plenty of sunshine across the south as well. A fine day to come for East Anglia and the southeast. But in these more central parts, so through Wales, northern England, much more cloud, and there will be some rain and drizzle too, particularly to the west of northern England and across the north and the west of Wales. Some brighter skies across the north of Northern Ireland. Sunny spells for most of Scotland, but there will be more showers packing in across the far north. Not as windy here as today, but still a noticeable and fairly chilly breeze. The clouds should tend to drift away from Northern Ireland through the day, so Belfast brightening up through the morning along with parts of southern Scotland, but much of northwest England, north and west Wales likely to stay fairly drab. Some rain and drizzle, especially over coasts and hills, and cooler here as a result, but some warmth across the southeast, 24, maybe 25 Celsius, only high teens further north, but still feeling pleasant in the sunshine. By the time we get to Sunday, the cloud and the rain and drizzle will have slipped further south, so a grey start across the southeast, but it should brighten up here. 1 or 2 showers here and there, some rain in Shetland, but for many Sundays dry. Quite a lot of cloud, but I think we'll still see some sunny spells coming through, but still on the cool side for most, with temperatures generally only in the high teens. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues near Falkirk. Firstly, M876 southbound slow at the intersection with the M80 at junction 8. Also slow for the M80 southbound further along around junction 7 for Hags. M1 northbound in Hertfordshire. We've got 2 lanes closed for a broken down vehicle causing queues. That's just after junction 8 Hemel Hempstead. Slow for the M1 southbound in Bedfordshire due to an earlier 3-vehicle accident just after junction 11A for Dunstable. Severe delays still on the M5 northbound in Somerset due to an earlier accident just before junction 24 Bridgewater South, and it's not helped by a lane close on the entry slip at junction 25 Taunton due to a broken down van. And we're seeing queuing traffic on the M25 clockwise in Hertfordshire due to an earlier broken down vehicle just after junction 19 Watford.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel. Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 4:38. I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News. Now, dozens of Just Stop Oil supporters have been arrested across England for reportedly planning to disrupt airports this summer. The Metropolitan Police confirmed that 27 people have been taken into custody under the Public Order Act, which makes it illegal to conspire to disrupt national infrastructure. And here's a clip of the moment some of them were arrested.
Are you detaining us at this time? Everyone is detained at this time. Okay.
At the moment in time is 1847 OK. I'm placing on for arrest for conspiracy to cause an interference to infrastructure in the UK. OK?
I've come here to sue.
You don't have to say anything, but it may harm offence if you do not mention my question something which you make behind. And if you do say, you may begin with this. OK? Yeah.
So, the grounds are that by taking part in the organisation of this event this evening, I suspect that you are taking part to cause serious disruption to UK airports.
The politicians have failed us. They've failed us with the 1.5% supposed degrees that's supposed to keep us safe. Good luck, everybody.
Hi, so my name's Daniel. I'm being arrested. I'm not really sure why. I'm at my parents' house right now. I was just here in London visiting my parents. I think I've been told I'm under arrest for conspiracy to commit a public nuisance. Well, this is what happens when you resist the British state.
Well, they certainly just stopped the soup, and I'm joined now in the studio by Just Stop Oil spokesperson Dr. Kush Naker. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Naker. So, on the one hand, people would say, good on them. This is proactive policing. Just Stop Oil have no right to angle grind their way into airports, disrupt the travel plans of thousands, and that could give ideas to terrorists, so they should have been arrested.
But what you need to look at is the actual laws and powers that the police have used in arresting these people. Is actually a law that was passed just last year saying that it's a criminal offence and you can be sent up to 12 months in prison for attempting to interfere with key national infrastructure.
But that law has actually been very, very broadly defined. And towards the end of last year, actually, the police were using this power against Just Stop Oil to stop people protesting by stepping into the road in Parliament Square, because Parliament Square is an A road and therefore deemed part of key national infrastructure.
But it is a part of key infrastructure. For example, when ambulances can't get through, when emergency response vehicles can't get through, we're seeing time and time again huge frustration from working people who can't get to work. But back to this particular instance, airports should quite rightly be very heavily protected, not just in case of people's disruption in terms of holidays. Don't suppose Just Stop Oil give a damn about that. But actually, it's a very, very dangerous thing to do. You could give ideas to all sorts of dodgy characters who might have a bit more than some orange spray paint.
But the problem with having such a broadly defined law is that you then completely leave it in the hands of the police to interpret when they want to enforce that, right? So people take part in protest marches around Parliament Square all of the time, and they're not all being arrested under Section 7 of the Public Order Act.
Yeah, but that's because
when
they
Just
get
Stop
permission.
Oil...
But they get permission for those marches and apply for a licence and tell the police. That's a separate thing altogether. When you're angle grinding through a fence and getting onto a runway, that's a completely different matter. And these laws actually, Kush, were brought in to stop Just Stop Oil because the police were standing off and soft-soaping you with tea and sympathy for months and months and months. They had to change the law to actually Just Stop Oil.
OK, well, if you're worried about the disruption to national infrastructure, then actually have a listen to what David Attenborough said when he spoke to the UN Security Council just ahead of when UK was hosting the COP. He described that the effects of extracting and burning oil and gas is the biggest threat to our national security.
But how will stopping people getting to Magaluf for 7 days holiday have anything to do with that?
But what you need to realise is that if we've got these laws that say that we're meant to protect national infrastructure from interference, then actually why are these laws not being used against the oil and gas executives or the politicians who are allowing us to continue extracting and burning fossil fuels?
Because it's government policy to do so, and it remains government policy to do so. It's not illegal to extract oil. It is illegal to angle grind your way onto a runway, and that could be a potential terrorist threat. The law is the law.
The effects of the climate emergency will disrupt roads, it will disrupt rail, it will disrupt airports, and not only will it disrupt those that are listed on the Public Order Act, it will also threaten our food supply, our access to clean water, our access to clean air. It will threaten health systems. I work as a doctor in the NHS, and we actually need to prepare for the effects that the climate emergency is now bringing because of increases in infectious disease outbreaks, because of increases in people suffering from heat stroke.
But the UK has hit its targets consistently, way in advance of many other nations. Our net zero targets, some of the most punitive in the Western world. Why don't you go and protest in China? Change yourself to a runway in Beijing, see what happens there.
Well, there have been protests actually just outside the Chinese embassy this week against their role in financing the East African crude oil pipeline. So I think it's disingenuous to suggest that no one is targeting the Chinese.
No, I'm just saying that in terms of global pollution, you know, Britain is way, way ahead of its targets. And it's making people poorer and colder.
But Britain also sparked off the Industrial Revolution, and we have benefited from the development that this country has seen from the use of oil and gas.
There's been more pollution in the last 10 years from China than in the entire Industrial Revolution from the UK since the start. The world's biggest polluters aren't Britain. I put it to you again, why don't you go and protest in countries like China or Saudi Arabia or Qatar? We know why, because they just bang you straight up in jail, and that's what's happening in Britain, and now you don't like it.
But isn't that terrifying to you, the fact that protesters, even in this country, are being treated just as they would in these other authoritarian regimes? What happened to freedom of speech in this country? What happened to democracy? Because the police can selectively use these powers to shut down protests before they even begin. It's now reaching the territory where it's becoming a thought crime to even take part in a protest that the government doesn't like. Because that's what this means, is that if the government doesn't like your protest, they can come along and send the police to arrest you.
Or you could say that Just Stop Oil activists said that what they did at Stansted, where they got the wrong Taylor Swift jet, by the way, they said that was a taste of things to come, a summer of chaos. That was your own words. That was leaked out. So you've been hung by your own petard. This is simply acting on intelligence and cutting out a threat to national security.
But taking disruptive action has been shown throughout history to be effective in creating large societal change at the rate that we need it right now.
Do you think you're winning the cause of public opinion? Because I don't.
Well, I think that people are now far more concerned about the climate crisis and demanding that their politicians act on it. And that is because of actions that Just Stop Oil have taken, getting it into the media, getting people talking about this. And so I would say that in that sense, yes, it has been a success.
People are talking about it, but in a good way. Look at the pictures on the screen there of Stonehenge being desecrated by these morons. People are talking about that, Kush, but do you think that's being talked about in a good way?
So people might not like it that we have put this cornstarch onto Stonehenge, and that's absolutely fine. But what that sparks is a conversation about the climate emergency. And when people talk about the climate emergency, it does make them realise that this is something that their politicians need to act on. And at the moment, the Tories are failing on it, Labour is failing on it, and so we need a real commitment to end the use of oil, gas and coal by 2030, and for our government to sign up to an international treaty to phase out fossil fuels.
Well, very eloquently put, and thank you very much for coming in and defending your position. Just Stop Oil spokesperson Dr. Kush Naker, thank you very much for coming in and explaining that to us here on GB News. Now, coming up, could Kate make a royal return next week at Wimbledon? And the latest as Princess Anne leaves hospital. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday, the 4th of July.
Only on GB News.
Britain's election channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
In World War I, 309 men from Britain and the Commonwealth never came home because they'd been shot at dawn. The majority were killed for desertion, cowardice and sleeping at post. Appearing at their court-martials and told they'd brought shame on their country, these men had no opportunity to defend themselves and were executed by a firing squad. The National Memorial Arboretum launched a fundraising campaign to restore the memorial, which has stood for more than 20 years.
Thank you to your viewers for their support for the fundraising campaign. And thanks to the generosity of so many people, we've been able to replace all 309 of the posts that represent those young men that were shot in the First World War, restoration of this really precious memorial.
The centrepiece of the memorial is the young soldier, blindfolded and facing his execution. In September 1916, Private Harry Farr was ordered to the front. Already suffering from shell shock, he was overwhelmed and refused his orders. He was court-martialed, and in a trial lasting only 20 minutes, he was sentenced to death. On the day of his execution, he faced the firing squad without a blindfold. Janet Booth is Private Farr's granddaughter and was part of the public campaign to have those who were shot at dawn officially pardoned.
When I asked my gran, do you know where I could find Harry's grave? And she looked at my mother and there was this sort of look between them, and then she said, well, he hasn't got a grave because they didn't warrant, he deserved one because he was shot as a coward and had let his country down. We can come here as a family and pay our respects to him, and also for all the other families, it's somewhere to come and remember their loved ones.
The People's Channel.
GB News is Britain's election channel.
And when the big stories break, we're tackling them on Britain's newsroom. When we disagree, and we disagree a lot, it's even livelier than normal.
We don't disagree that much.
We do.
His comedy, though, is revolting. I knew her, and unlike you.
That explains Beverly Turner's temperament.
It's a bit frosty in here, isn't it?
He'll have one of me one day.
For dartball practice.
Britain's newsroom on GB News, weekdays, 9:30 a.m.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Welcome back, 10 to 5. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, speculations are being made as to whether or not the Princess of Wales will attend Wimbledon this year as she continues her treatment for cancer. Now, officials say that they will give Princess Catherine as much flexibility as possible, but they are hopeful that she will present trophies to the champions. Wouldn't that be marvellous? Well, join me now to discuss this. To tell me more is the royal broadcaster Helena Chard. Helena, welcome to the show. So as we found out at Trooping the Colour, Catherine has good days and bad days. Many people will be hoping we can see another one of those good days, and what a tremendous spectacle it would be to see Catherine giving out trophies at Wimbledon.
Absolutely. I mean, we're all gunning for it. And I know, tennis gives Princess of Wales so much joy. So as much as we want to see her there, we want her there as well because obviously it gets her through her treatment. We know she has good days and bad days, but I know that she's gunning to be there. And I just, she really will light up the royal box. Everyone will be so excited to see her, as well as giving out the trophies. But I think that's next month, isn't it? So I hope we can have a little bit of both things. It would be just so great just to see her there. It would be perfect. She obviously is such a fantastic tennis player. We know that she's the patron of the England Lawn Tennis Club as well. And, seeing her play, I think it was last year with Federer, and sort of cheer on the ball boys and girls. And she really does empower and inspire. And it's everything she's about as well. She knows that Wimbledon inspires young people to get involved in tennis, in the sport, which is something that she wants to be part of. And, we love to see her looking glamorous. And we miss that. And it was so lovely to see her at Trooping the Colour. And again, it would be lovely to see her, again, looking radiant as she did. But just to remember, she looks just as great. She's so sporty and looks wonderful just running around, in her tennis gear or tracksuit, just with her hair loose. It's just a lovely, elegant look as well. And that's something I think which is a good look to portray to everyone at the moment. So we really, really hope that that's going to be the case. I'm pretty sure we will see her. That's the feeling I get. Absolutely.
Well, you've certainly built the moment up there. Fantastic stuff. Now, we've got a quick minute to quickly talk about Princess Anne, Princess Royal, her recovery.
Oh, absolutely. Princess Anne, poor Princess Anne. I bet she was climbing the walls. That's what I do know. I'm so pleased that she's been released, and I know that she'll be itching to get back to work. She's so dutiful. She's all about, getting out there and meeting the people. And Southmead Hospital, obviously in Bristol, have looked after her. So Timothy Lawrence is saying, she's doing fine, slow but sure. I mean, she would like to be out there working next week. I'm sure she was due to be in Scotland, I think, and she would be love to be there. I know that she suffered concussion. I think that was when she was at the Olympics, but that was a long time ago, 1976, I think.
Okay.
Because she's a little bit older, she has to recuperate.
Helena Chard, I'm afraid we have to leave it there. I know you could talk all day on this, but we have to leave it there. Fantastic to have your company. Thank you very much. Now, coming up with top Democrat officials calling for him to go is Joe Biden, now completely toast. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's News Channel. Now it's your weather with Alex Deakin.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A fresher feel out there, certainly compared to earlier in the week. Many of us having a fine end to the working week. It's just not particularly warm. And it's still quite gusty across northern Scotland. Plenty of showers packing in here. 1 or 2 showers across southern Scotland and northern England through the evening and overnight. But most places will be dry. Some lengthy clear spells in the east, but it will cloud over further west during the early hours. Staying quite warm under that clouds, but with some clearer skies, we'll easily see temperatures dropping down into single figures. Still quite breezy in northern Scotland on Saturday. A few showers here, but much of Scotland dry and fine with some good spells of sunshine and plenty of sunshine across the south as well. A fine day to come for East Anglia and the southeast. But in these more central parts, so through Wales, northern England, much more cloud, and there will be some rain and drizzle too, particularly to the west of northern England and across the north and the west of Wales. Some brighter skies across the north of Northern Ireland. Sunny spells for most of Scotland, but there will be more showers packing in across the far north. Not as windy here as today, but still a noticeable and fairly chilly breeze. The clouds should tend to drift away from Northern Ireland through the day, so Belfast brightening up through the morning along with parts of southern Scotland, but much of northwest England, north and west Wales likely to stay fairly drab. Some rain and drizzle, especially over coasts and hills, and cooler here as a result, but some warmth across the southeast, 24, maybe 25 Celsius, only high teens further north, but still feeling pleasant in the sunshine. By the time we get to Sunday, the cloud and the rain and drizzle will have slipped further south, so a grey start across the southeast, but it should brighten up here. 1 or 2 showers here and there, some rain in Shetland, but for many Sundays dry. Quite a lot of cloud, but I think we'll still see some sunny spells coming through, but still on the cool side for most, with temperatures generally only in the high teens. Bye for now.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm John Vincent. Queues on the M8 westbound in Glasgow. There's a lane closed for a broken down vehicle just after junction 15 for Townhead. Slow on the M90 Friarton Bridge due to strong winds. It's also very slow on the M90 northbound and the A9 southbound towards the Broxton roundabout. Queue in traffic near Falkirk, firstly for the M876 southbound at junction 8 of the M80, and further down the M80 southbound it's very slow at junction 7 for Hags. Queues on the M25 in Surrey. There's been a multi-vehicle accident at junction 6 for Godstone, and it's slow for the M1 northbound in Hertfordshire due to an earlier broken down vehicle just after junction 8 for Hemel Hempstead, and it's stop-start for the M25 anti-clockwise in Kent at the Dartford tunnels. And that's the latest traffic and travel news.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday the 4th of July.
Only on GB News.
Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
As time passes, she could have said storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
On election night, we are throwing a party.
The GB News Election Night Watch Party will be live from Essex and you are all invited.
On air from 10 o'clock, we'll have familiar faces from across the channel, entertainment and lots more stuff as we keep our eye on all the results as they come flying in.
If you want to join our live Election Night Watch Party audience, scan the QR code on screen or go to gbnews.com/election party.
A very, very good afternoon to you. It's 5 p.m. Happy Friday and welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News, broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster, all across the UK. On today's show, is it time for Joe to go? Because after Joe Biden's disastrous TV debate with Donald Trump last night, described as a car crash and the Democrats' DEFCON 1 moment, top donors are today demanding the president stands aside for a younger candidate. But who might that be? And can anybody stop the Trump train? Next up, the Reform Party has axed a volunteer after an undercover sting exposed their reprehensible comments. But should political leaders be responsible for everything their activists say or do? And if so, why isn't that same rule being applied to all political parties? And the luck of the draw is on England's side, is it? As the Three Lions gear up to face Slovakia on Sunday, will the Three Lions seize the chance, or will they once again be the Three Lambs? And the only thing that will come home is Gareth Southgate. And a 12-year-old Jewish boy was visited by a Prevent Counterterrorism officer and the police after he posted, "I want to see Hamas obliterated" on social media. They then tried to confiscate his wooden toy crossbow that apparently had the power of a potato gun. We'll speak to the activist who's helping the boy to get justice, and that's all coming up in your next hour. Welcome to the show. Hope you're having a fantastic Friday thus far. Joe Biden had a terrible time. There's no getting away from it. An opinion poll out overnight saying 68% of Americans don't think he should stand at the next election as a president, including 41% of his own voters in 2020. And can you believe that the betting odds checker now only have Joe Biden down at a 21% chance to win the next presidential election? Is it time for Joe to go? And also the Reform Party racism row rumbles on. Rishi Sunak now has commented. We'll get the latest on that. Is it fair that political parties are responsible for every single activist, no matter how far down the food chain that goes? And if so, why isn't the same rule being applied to other political parties? Let me know what you think. Send your views, gbnews.com/your say. But before we kick off into the next hour, it's your headlines with Cameron Walker.
Thanks, Martin. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 5. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says the leader of Reform UK has questions to answer after a video emerged of a campaigner making racist comments. Andrew Parker was seen making a series of offensive remarks about Rishi Sunak. He's now apologised, but insists he was goaded into making them. Rishi Sunak says it's part of a broader pattern of behaviour. A warning: the following clip contains some offensive language.
When my two daughters have to see and hear Reform people who campaign for Nigel Farage calling me an effing, it hurts and it makes me angry, and I think he has some questions to answer. When you see Reform candidates and campaigners seemingly using racist and misogynistic language and opinions, seemingly without challenge, I think it tells you something about the culture within the Reform Party. Our politics and country is better than that. It's my duty to call out this corrosive and divisive behaviour.
Well, Nigel Farage said earlier that the comments have no place in the party and describes the secretly recorded video as a setup.
Someone told us he was an actor. We rang him this morning, the Daily Telegraph rang him this morning. He denied point blank that he was an actor. It turns out he is an actor. I found his website. He's a well-spoken actor who does something called rough speaking. Well, I was in the office when he arrived last Saturday, and he was doing rough speaking. It was an act right from the very start. So
you'd met him?
I was working, and he came in and came up to me and said hello, and then he went out canvassing where the undercover filming took place. And he was rough speaking. He wasn't being himself from day one. I have to tell you, this whole thing is a complete and total setup.
Well, in a statement, a spokesperson for Channel 4 says they strongly stand by what they called rigorous and duly impartial journalism, which they say speaks for itself. Meanwhile, lawyers for two people who became sick after eating sandwiches containing E. coli have started legal action against Tesco and Asda. The claims related to an 11-year-old girl from the northwest of England who ate a chicken salad sandwich. She's now been on dialysis for 3 weeks after falling ill. Separate legal action is also being taken against Tesco on behalf of a man who says he regularly purchased sandwiches for his lunch. At least 122 people have been admitted to hospital since the start of the outbreak, which has also led to the recall of wraps and salads sold at several major retailers. Police in Tenerife are calling for specialist volunteers to take place in a new large-scale search for a missing British teenager. Jay Slater went missing 12 days ago, and police have been scouring CCTV footage for his last known movements. The Spanish Civil Guard said in a statement that the latest search would begin at 9 o'clock local time tomorrow in the village of Masca. They're asking for volunteers with experience as fire crews and professional search and rescue. A security guard accused of hatching a plan to kidnap, rape and murder the TV presenter Holly Willoughby has been giving evidence in court.
You're under arrest on suspicion of conspiracy to kidnap. You do not have to say anything.
Gavin Plum told Chelmsford Crown Court he's heartbroken, disgusted and shocked that his online chats about the alleged plot have come out. He said his dark discussions were massively regrettable, but insisted the alleged plans were a fantasy and not real. Plum from Harlow in Essex denies soliciting murder, incitement to rape and incitement to kidnap. The trial continues. The Met Police says a total of 27 Just Stop Oil supporters have been arrested in a coordinated raid after the group threatened to disrupt summer holidays. 4 people were arrested on Tuesday after being identified at Gatwick Airport and have since been released on bail. It also comes after 6 members of the group, some described as being key organisers, were arrested in Hackney in East London last night. To the US now, and President Biden clashed with Donald Trump last night in the first televised debate in the race for the White House. With nearly 2 months to go until Biden's formally nominated as the Democrats' nominee, the 81-year-old has had hopes to build more support for his re-election. But the president often struggled to counter Donald Trump, allowing the former president to make a series of claims without being challenged. Rather than quashing concerns about his age, Joe Biden's stilted and shaky performance has reignited concerns within the Democratic Party over whether he ought to be their nominee. In royal news now, Princess Anne has returned home after several days in hospital with minor injuries and concussion. The 73-year-old is believed to have been struck by a horse while walking on the Gatcombe Park estate in Gloucestershire on Sunday evening. Her husband, Vice Admiral Tim Lawrence, has thanked the team at Southmead Hospital in Bristol for their care, expertise and kindness. Well, those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Cameron Walker. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Cameron. Now, after a decidedly rocky debate performance last night, senior figures in the Democratic Party are now contemplating removing Joe Biden as the party's presumptive nominee and replacing him with someone else at the party's August convention. Joe Biden appeared confused at times in the debate last night. And let's take a quick look at one of those moments.
Eligible for what I've been able to do with the with the COVID, with dealing with everything we have to do with, look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden.
It just gets worse the more you see it, doesn't it? And we're joined now by the spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK, Errol Moorcoach. Errol, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us. The dust has settled on the debate. His own supportive media platform, CNN, 67% of those there think Donald Trump won that debate. In a Daily Mail poll overnight, 68% think Biden should not stand, including 41% of his own voters in 2020, and now top donors are simply saying somebody else has got to stand, and his own advisors are saying it was painful to watch. He has to go. Errol, is there any way that Joe Biden should stay on as the president nominee, the candidate for the Democratic Party?
It's two answers to that question. On one hand, for the voters, for the sake of the country, for the sake of ethics, all of these decent reasons, no. But Joe Biden is a zombie candidate. He's being operated and manipulated by other people. And if any other candidate was switched in, they would lose the election. There's a Democrat Party inside the Democrat Party, and that's called Joe Biden. And while all the advisors and strategists are looking at this and saying, oh my God, we're going to get clobbered, they don't realize that this isn't it isn't a free market in the Democrat Party. We saw what happened with Bernie Sanders, and Hillary Clinton, how in the convention, it wasn't a free and fair election. And now the same thing's going to happen, but they have the incumbency. They have no reason to back down. They have still 46% of the country supporting them. It is a tight window, but they're going to play this out. I don't think that they're going to switch him out. I don't think that Joe Biden is going to back down. In fact, CNN just reported that the campaign at least has informed them that he will be accepting a second debate and moving forward. So also in Joe Biden's defense, not of his performance, but in a statistical sense, the incumbent almost always loses the first debate. So they can point to these losses and this and that and kind of hope that, okay, that's how it went in the first time. We still have a second one to go. So because he's a zombie candidate, he's not actually running the country. His handlers don't want the Democrat Party to win. They want to win with Joe Biden. And that's the ultimate problem that's facing Democrat voters. And a lot of those people are going to start looking for maybe RFK Jr. or even considering voting for Donald Trump as the economy and global politics situation continues to disintegrate.
But Errol, we saw an astonishing video from the Donald Trump war room. Trump's own campaign put a video out that entirely consisted of clips of Joe Biden, of him corpsing, of him not being able to remember what he was saying. Donald Trump didn't say a word in his own attack video. They were simply using footage of Joe Biden freezing up. Why would the Democratic Party want to go back for round two of this torture?
Again, they're not doing it to win an election. They're doing it to win an election with Joe Biden. And they can manipulate and change people's opinions, they feel. They have their spokesperson saying, don't believe the videos you see, they're doctored and this and that. Honestly, Joe Biden did a little bit better than I thought he would. He only completely stalled one time. Other times he just rambled incoherently. I expected him to stall 3 or 4 times. So if you know how bad Joe Biden could have been, if you'd been in that Camp David coaching session with his handlers for a week, perhaps they were actually pretty impressed and they think that he could do better. So that's where we're at. We're not running on a logic campaign. Kamala Harris even could probably do better than Joe Biden at this point. But Gavin Newsom, Gretchen Whitmer, these people could very well win an election, and they're completely sidelined because there's 2 factions inside the Democrat Party, and it's not to the behest of their voters, but it is what's going to happen in November.
But can you help us try and understand that, this side of the pond in Britain? Because somebody who's clearly, struggling to cope with a debate, who's struggling to know where the exit is to a stage, who's struggling to get up a set of stairs, who's struggling to sit down, sometimes struggling, it would seem, to know where he even is. How is that a credible frontman for a candidate? How does that work? I mean, the approval ratings have gone down. An odds checker, the betting odds overnight, Errol, says that only 21% chance of Joe Biden winning that election. Surely the most logical thing to do is cut your losses and go with a fresh set of boots.
Yes, in some respects, I agree. However, you would have that chaos in the election. It would look like a movement of weakness. And in the end, he won that election in 2020 by being an avatar candidate. He had the sunglasses, the ice cream cone. He never talked to anybody. This was the first time most of us had heard Joe Biden speak without a teleprompter or approved questions. I can't even remember the last time. Maybe the last debate. I don't know. So the ability for them to believe they can still win this in a propaganda sense, they still have the mechanisms. They still have the hundreds of millions of dollars that have poured in there. Yes, they're losing support by rational people. Yes, big tech is starting to say, well, hang on a second. These guys are a little bit even too extreme for Hollywood and San Francisco liberals. And while that might turn on them, they still are going to play those cards out to the end because that's all they have. They're trying to win with Joe Biden again. They're not trying to win with any other candidate because another candidate would have their own opinions and also would change certain courses on things. Joe Biden does as they tell him to do. Whoever they are is up for debate. And I'm not here to make a conspiracy. I'm just saying he has an effective apparatus and team, the same people oftentimes who worked for Mr. Barack Obama who are working with Joe Biden. And these people are running the show. So that's why they won't change it. There's no reason to. They would lose if they win with Gavin Newsom. It's very weird.
It certainly is fascinating. So thanks for trying to make it slightly more understandable. Spokesperson for Republicans Overseas UK, Errol Moorcoach, thank you very much for joining us on the show. And I'm joined now by GBNews' US correspondent, Stephen Edgington. Steve, welcome to the show. So straight after that debate last night in America, you took the temperature in that room. It seemed almost universally people felt that Donald Trump had won. Well, more to the point, Joe Biden had lost. America is waking up now, Steve. It's the morning after the night before. Tell us, how is the media reacting? How's this playing out over that side of the pond?
Well, the liberal media are in meltdown. I think they've seen their candidate completely fail multiple times in the debate last night when it came to his cognitive abilities, particularly his closing statement where he sort of rambled on incoherently for around a minute. And Trump really took advantage of some of these key moments in the debate. I think we've even seen CNN, MSNBC, these very left-wing media outlets saying Biden, he's not the right man to be president at the moment. He shouldn't be the candidate for the Democratic Party ahead of November. He simply can't do this for another 4 years. So it's been an incredible and interesting reaction to this debate. I mean, I think compared to the other debates held in 2016 and 2020, there really has been a shift. You know, the Democrats love to say that they won those debates. And in this case, I think it's undeniable that Trump won. Even the New York Times, every single opinion columnist they had writing about the debate said that it was either a draw or that Trump had significantly won. So the reaction here on the liberal side of things has been chaos and I think disappointment. On the conservative side of things, people are very happy, obviously, with Trump's performance last night. He was measured. I think the rules kind of worked for him. He didn't interrupt Biden very much. He seemed quite moderate compared to his more shouty moments. So I think conservatives are very happy with Trump's performance last night.
What about the Democratic Party machine, Steve? We're seeing donors already starting to wobble. Are we really going to be shoveling millions of dollars into a guy who doesn't seem to know the difference between a pair of socks? And we've got a Democratic Party donor told Politico off the record, our only hope is that he either bows out, we have a brokered convention, i.e. a negotiation, or he dies. Is it really getting to the point where they simply feel they cannot replace this guy, but they're desperate to do so?
Well, what we haven't seen is any major figures come out publicly and saying that Biden shouldn't be the Democratic candidate. We've got these kind of backroom briefings to various news organizations. But what will really change, I think, the dial or shift the dial is if we see these major Democratic figures coming out publicly and saying this man cannot be our candidate. The Democrats are in a real trouble here because they've got to think about who can replace Biden, who can beat Donald Trump. Gavin Newsom is one of the names that everyone talks about. He's the governor of California. He's very charming. He's very suave. He's quite charismatic. He's very good with the media. However, he is a white man. And in the age of the Democratic, politics in 2024, that is a huge disadvantage. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, she's a black woman. She's vice president. And I think she has a very good shot of becoming the candidate ahead of November if they do remove Biden. And she is a very, very weak candidate. People hate her here. People think she's inauthentic. People think that she's not very bright. She hasn't been a very good vice president. According to the opinion polls, she's even more unpopular than Joe Biden. So I think the Democrats are in a real kerfuffle after what happened last night.
Absolutely. It's just worth checking on those odds checkers there, Steve Edgerton. Astonishing. Only 21% chance of Joe Biden winning if he stays as the next presidential candidate. Gavin Newsom is on 14%. Kamala Harris, 5.8%. So the two candidates in the wings, not even matching up to Joe Biden in the state he's in. Astonishing stuff. Steve Edgerton, thank you very much for joining us live from America as America wakes up the morning after the night before that astonishing debate. Now, you get lots more of that story on our website. And thanks to you, GBNews.com is the fastest growing national news website in the country. It's got breaking news and all of the brilliant analysis that you've come to expect from us here at GB News. Well, coming up, we can see live pictures now of a Biden campaign rally in North Carolina, where the president will be speaking as Americans react to his disappointing performance in the first debate. Well, they're keeping their spirits up despite everything we saw on screen last night, grinning their best as they wake up to that debate the morning after the night before. More on that throughout the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat zone.
As time passes, she could have said storm.
You made my argument for me.
My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
Went everywhere.
Something practical could be done.
Or I can become something different.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
So there was a calf that was run down by a Surrey police car. It's now being nursed back to health, according to the family who own the farm that the calf escaped from.
Well, he didn't just run him over once, he ran him over twice.
No, we're not showing you the footage. The footage is really shocking. But the police officer who was driving this vehicle has now been taken off frontline duties until a full investigation is completed. And I feel like I'm yet again the only person in the country who thinks the police officer was just doing his job. That police officer, probably a young guy who's got dual carriageways left, right and centre in that area. Do you know what the most popular business is in that area in Feltham?
Farming.
McDonald's drive-through. It's got a queue round the block anytime you go around that area. And all those people queuing for McDonald's who are now outraged that this poor cow had to die.
Because it's going to be at McDonald's at some point.
At some point, he was going to die. I'm really sorry. If you eat meat, you can't be upset by a cow dying. I think the fast roads with cars at 10 o'clock at night in the dark, they're not expecting a cow to walk out in the middle of the night. There would have been a massive pile-up. Then there'd been, like, who knows how many people dead. And then the police would have been criticised for not neutralising the threat.
The thing is, it was because he did... why... You could see the first time, the calf could barely stand up. I just don't get why I had to then go and do it a second time.
Well, I suppose at that point it's a bit like if you run over like a deer on the side of the road, you know, and if the police they're going to kill the animal to put it out of its misery. That's all I can presume. And the guy's not trained. This is Feltham. It isn't Texas. He's not going to come out with a lasso. He doesn't know what to do.
Where did this happen, Feltham?
Feltham. I'm sure the inbox is now going to be full of people saying, "Bev, you're outrageous. You lack compassion."
No, there will be people who agree with you. But if it had been done once, that was enough. But I don't think it needed to do it the second time.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Congratulations to the GB News winners at this year's TRIC Awards.
And the winner of Interview of the Year is... Alistair Stewart reveals his heartbreaking diagnosis to Camilla Tominey.
And the winner is GB News Breakfast. And the winner is Nigel Farage.
And thank you to you, our GB News viewers and listeners, for making us the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, and we are Britain's election channel.
This vote may seem to be about the politicians and the media, but it's actually about you. We won't forget that.
Join us up and down the country as we follow every moment together.
More than ever, it's important to hear all sides
as you make your decision in the run-up to polling day.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. It's 5:24. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, a 12-year-old Jewish boy is under investigation by counter-terrorism officers after he said that he wanted Hamas to be wiped out. GB News can reveal. The boy's family, who have requested anonymity, have been interviewed by counter-terrorism police officers and also local police about a fear of radicalisation. Well, let's speak now to former police officer and the founder of Fair Cop, Harry Miller. Harry, welcome to the show. An astonishing story. A 12-year-old Jewish boy with a wooden crossbow. Osama bin Laden, he ain't. Why on earth did counter-terror cops turn up to his door?
Absolutely no idea. What we do know is that his school, who clearly employ Maoist apparatchiks rather than teachers, have listened to the boy in the playground and decided that he is expressing views which they don't like. For instance, he said that he'd like to obliterate Hamas. He said that there are only two sexes. He said, I'm gay, not queer. And these people have decided that this is so serious that they need to get hold of not just the police, but the anti-terrorist police. So they contacted them, and rather than taking this complaint and throwing it in the bin, the Chief Constable of Northumbria, together with Prevent, have decided that this person represents a real and present danger, and so they've been to his house. They went there on Tuesday. One of the things that this boy was seen doing was playing with a wooden bow and arrow. This is the kind of thing that shoots like a potato gun. It has a velocity of about 2 feet. It is a child's toy. But nevertheless, the police and the anti-terrorist unit have decided that this demonstrates a terrorist mindset. And without immediate intervention, this boy was going to end up working for a terrorist organization. So instead, they've gone there, and they must have decided that cells come up in Guantanamo Bay, and they've decided they're going to fill it with 12-year-old boys with their bows and arrows. It's absolutely preposterous, Martin. I have no words to say. What I can say, I was so angry when I met the detective constable and the officer from Prevent. One, I was angry because they refused to say why they were there. Once I appeared, they just said, right, that's the meeting over, we're leaving. I followed them out of the house, and I said, if you ever show up on this person's doorstep again, I will arrest the pair of you. And they looked at me, gone out, and I said, you just watch me, because I will. We do not have in this country a terrorist police force that goes around terrorising 12-year-old boys and their parents on council estates in the northeast of England because they happen to believe that there are only two sexes and because they play with bows and arrows. It's absolutely disgusting. Every single chief constable who signs up to this ridiculous nonsense needs firing. And I would start with Chief Constable Vanessa Jardine. She needs to be gone, and she needs to be gone by Monday morning. It's as simple as that.
Okay, Harry Miller, you're clearly full of beans on this one, and it certainly is an astonishing story. Can I ask you, on a more human note, how's the lad doing? How is his mother doing? This would be very, very harrowing for any ordinary family to be put through this kind of a nightmare.
Well, they are bearing up because they know they're on the right side of common sense. What the police did does not pass the pub test. It doesn't pass the common sense test. It's absolutely ridiculous.
Wow, I think Harry was getting so animated there. He's bashed himself off the camera. Okay, Harry, before we get, let's try to see if we get Harry Miller back. It's well worth pointing out that this situation is astonishing. They also went through. They demanded his Snapchat details, his full social media details. They claimed that they had proof that he'd listened to an Israeli parody act called Ruka Ruka Ali, which is a parody act as evidence this boy had been radicalised. Remember, this kid is 12. This kid is Jewish, and he was visited by counter-terrorism police at his home. He'd also been asked at school, this is on the record, by a teacher if the school showers reminded him of gas chambers. Now, that's the kind of thing that you think would be said to a Jewish child and would traumatise that child. That wasn't passed on to the authorities. but this was. And now we have a situation. Where basically this 12-year-old kid is under investigation. His mother is too. Harry Miller from Faircop, as you heard there, has intervened. And now we have a standoff. Now, Harry Miller is a man who gets results. He won at the High Court on a freedom of speech issue over a transphobic limerick he allegedly published, and he got the law overturned. Harry Miller got the law overturned. Now he's on the side of this lad. That's the kind of person you want in your corner. Now, we've got a joint statement here we need to read out from Northumbria Police and the Counterterrorism Policing North East, and it says this. Now, we are unable to discuss individual cases or identify anyone who may or may not be the subject of a prevent referral. All referrals are treated in the strictest confidence and will always prioritise the safety and welfare of those concerned. Prevent is a multi-agency approach to safeguarding and supporting those most at risk of radicalisation through early intervention. It seeks to protect young and vulnerable people against all forms of extremist activity, regardless of ideology. As a force, Northumbria Police is committed to supporting its diverse communities. We make it our mission to forge strong relationships, and we are here to offer support wherever it is needed. So before we go to the news, I want to go through a few of your emails, your says. I've been asking you for your take on the two big political stories of the day. That's the Biden-Trump debate in America and also a situation with reform in UK. Now, let's go through a few of your says on the reform situation. Anthony says this: I'll still vote Reform UK no matter what any offence is given in the campaign. You always get bad apples in all campaigns. He's been kicked out. Nigel isn't responsible. That's from Anthony. Peter adds this: hopefully the police will be charging someone shortly for their aggravated and racial slur. So Peter again saying this is down to the individual involved and not the party. Catalan adds this: Reform are now making terrible racist comments against Rishi Sunak. Their true colours are showing. This is disgraceful. I'll be changing my vote. Whereas Carol says this: the reform issue looks like a setup. I don't think many believe it was anything but a setup. It certainly won't change my vote. So there we go. You're very divided on that. There's lots more still to come between now and 6 o'clock as Labour claim the Conservatives are to blame for the recent mortgage bombshell. We'll have a shadow minister joining us to ask what a Starmer government would do for homeowners in Britain. But first, it's time for your latest news headlines with Cameron Walker.
Martin, thank you. It's 5:32. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says the leader of Reform UK has questions to answer after a video emerged of a campaigner making racist comments. Andrew Parker was seen making a series of offensive remarks about Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister. He's now apologised but insists he was goaded into making them. Rishi Sunak says it's part of a broader pattern of behaviour. Reform UK's leader, Nigel Farage, describes the video as a setup, but Channel 4 says it stands by its journalism. The Met Police says a total of 27 Just Stop Oil supporters have been arrested in a coordinated raid after the group threatened to disrupt summer holidays. It comes as 4 people were arrested at Gatwick Airport. They've since been released on bail. A security guard accused of hatching a plan to kidnap, rape and murder the TV presenter Holly Willoughby has been giving evidence in court.
You're under arrest on suspicion of conspiracy to kidnap. You do not have to sign anything.
Gavin Plum told Chelmsford Crown Court he's heartbroken, disgusted and shocked that his online chats about the alleged plot have come out. He said his dark discussions were massively regrettable, but insisted the alleged plans were a fantasy and not real. Plum from Harlow in Essex denies soliciting murder, incitement to rape and incitement to kidnap. The trial continues. Now, police in Tenerife are calling for specialist volunteers to take part in a new large-scale search for a British teenager. Jay Slater went missing 12 days ago, and police have been scouring CCTV footage for his last known movements. The Spanish Civil Guard said in a statement that the latest search would begin at 9 o'clock local time tomorrow in the village of Masca. Now, we have some breaking news. Staffordshire police have said they are not looking for anyone else in connection with the deaths of a woman and a man in Staffordshire. Police opened a murder investigation after the bodies of 24-year-old Daniel Duffield and 22-year-old Lauren Evans were discovered in a property in Hednesford area on Tuesday afternoon. Police say post-mortems have been carried out and the causes of the deaths will be determined at the inquest.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2638 and 1.1794 euros. The price of gold is £1,844 and 9 pence per ounce, and the FTSE 100 closed the day at 8,164 points.
Cheers Britannia Wine Club proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Now, if you want to get in touch, simply go to gbnews.com/your say, and I'll read out the best of your messages a little later in the show. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Afternoon, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A fresher feel out there, certainly compared to earlier in the week. Many of us having a fine end to the working week. It's just not particularly warm. And it's still quite gusty across northern Scotland. Plenty of showers packing in here. 1 or 2 showers across southern Scotland and northern England through the evening and overnight. But most places will be dry. Some lengthy clear spells in the east, but it will cloud over further west during the early hours. Staying quite warm under that clouds, but with some clearer skies, we'll easily see temperatures dropping down into single figures. Still quite breezy in northern Scotland on Saturday. A few showers here, but much of Scotland dry and fine with some good spells of sunshine and plenty of sunshine across the south as well. A fine day to come for East Anglia and the southeast. But in these more central parts, so through Wales, northern England, much more cloud, and there will be some rain and drizzle too, particularly to the west of northern England and across the north and the west of Wales. Some brighter skies across the north of Northern Ireland. Sunny spells for most of Scotland, but there will be more showers packing in across the far north. Not as windy here as today, but still a noticeable and fairly chilly breeze. The clouds should tend to drift away from Northern Ireland through the day, so Belfast brightening up through the morning along with parts of southern Scotland, but much of northwest England, north and west Wales likely to stay fairly drab. Some rain and drizzle, especially over coasts and hills, and cooler here as a result. But some warmth across the southeast, 24, maybe 25 Celsius. Only high teens further north, but still feeling pleasant in the sunshine. By the time we get to Sunday, the cloud and the rain and drizzle will have slipped further south, so a grey start across the southeast, but it should brighten up here. 1 or 2 showers here and there, some rain in Shetland, but for many Sundays dry. Quite a lot of cloud, but I think we'll still see some sunny spells coming through, but still on the cool side for most, with temperatures generally only in the high teens. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, my name is Johnny Ratner. The M6 in Staffordshire is blocked both ways between the Stafford services and junction 15 near Stoke at the scene of a multi-vehicle collision. Long queues on the approach and on the D road heading through Stoke past the Hanford interchange as you divert. Not far from there, the M42 is queuing northbound just after the Tamworth exit at the A5. A car is on fire in the 2 left lanes. The Surrey stretch of the M25 coming from Kent, really slow clockwise from the M26 after that collision further round at Godstone. On the M20, the coastbound entry slip is partly blocked to junction 10 near Ashford following an accident, and long delays in Somerset on the M5 heading northbound. A lane is closed on the entry slip. A van's broken down at junction 25 at Taunton, where recovery work is underway as you come off the main carriageway, not being helped by that earlier collision further north at Bridgewater. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This election night, we're putting on a party.
And you are invited.
We'll be here with you.
Following all the twists and turns.
As well as all the live reaction from our election night watch party.
With our GB News lineup.
And as morning breaks, we'll be here with breakfast from 6 a.m.
As it becomes clear who the winners and the losers really are.
Vote 2024.
Thursday, the 4th of July.
Only on GB News.
Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Your time is 5:39. We're on the final furlong. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, the Labour Party has claimed that 5 more years of Conservative government will result in people paying more for their mortgages, pointing to new analysis which suggests families will soon be paying £211 more in monthly mortgage payments. And the party also claims to have exposed £40 billion worth of waste on Rishi Sunak's watch, dating all the way back to 2019. Let's get more now on this story with Shadow Industry and Decarbonisation Minister Sarah Jones. Sarah, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have your company. Would you mind if we started off by talking about decarbonisation and the cost of it? Something which no doubt you're an expert on. Leaked audio this week from Darren Jones, the Shadow Chief Secretary to Treasury, said the £28 billion per year figure of decarbonisation by 2050, Labour's plan, is actually a drop in the ocean. He said that we will actually need hundreds of billions of pounds per year to hit those targets, and many people feel this could be one of the hidden taxes we might get under a Labour government. Billions of pounds to hit net zero targets that will make all of us net poorer.
Well, that's not the case. I can reassure all of your viewers. We will need to be spending money on the decarbonisation process. That is true. But the vast majority of that money will be spent by private companies and investors who own the businesses and run the industry that needs to decarbonise. So when I talk, as I do all the time, to different industries, whether it's those that are at the forefront of all those new renewable energies, or whether it's our existing industry who know that they need to decarbonise and are thinking about how they do that, what they want from government is a couple of things. They want stability, they want certainty, a plan, so they know that government is interested in supporting, for example, hydrogen or carbon capture, which we are, but we'll do that through a proper industrial strategy that sets out what the government's priorities are and what we need for the country. And then what they want is some help, some of the time, which we have set out in our manifesto, is fully costed through our windfall tax on oil and gas companies, which will invest in some of these sectors that we know we need to grow. So whether that's hydrogen, whether that's carbon capture, whether that's green steel, whether that's gigafactories, whether it's upgrading some of our port infrastructure, those are the things where government will step in. But we will want something in return. We will want to have some kind of stake in what is then happening for the communities that are taking that infrastructure and building those and creating those jobs of the future.
Do you think that raising taxes, windfall taxes on oil companies will have the net effect they just won't bother to invest in the UK? We've already seen the oil companies saying, why should they passively just come here and get walloped? We live in a globalised world. They can go around the world and not get so punitively taxed. And that will have the net effect, will it not, of just stopping oil?
So all we are taxing is the windfall. This isn't a permanent tax. This is a tax on the extraordinary profits that people have made as a result of the big shock that we had with Ukraine and the changing prices that we saw coming from that. So it is a tax that only exists on the excess profits that they have made. And once those excess profits are reduced down, then the windfall tax stops. And we are working with the oil and gas companies because there are a lot of people who work in the oil and gas industry. We know that industry is going to diminish over time. I mean, we're going to be using gas for decades to come. We know that, but we will be building the new renewable industries. And what we need to do as government is what is our role to try and retrain and move people from the older sectors, the older industries, to the newer, so that people can carry on having a job, having security, being able to thrive with good, well-paid jobs.
Is it not more common sense, rather than taxing oil companies to the hilt to deliver and produce within the UK? That means we have to rely on importing. 70% of our requirements come from fossil fuels, whether we like it or not. That's as a whole, not just at the power point. We can't run cement factories off of wind turbines. Surely a more sensible solution is to make it easier and cheaper to generate fossil fuels in Britain, not tax them offshore.
No, I think you're completely wrong. The cheapest thing to do is to invest in renewable energies, which are much cheaper. And if we build them in the UK, they're not connected to the international oil and gas prices. The problem with oil and gas is that it's connected to the international prices. So when when Russia invaded Ukraine and all of a sudden the world shifted where it was wanting to buy its oil and gas and not wanting to buy it from Russia, the price of everything increased and we had no control over that. That price increase had nothing to do with what we're producing in this country. It was all about the global price for oil and gas and the world's kind of scramble to get oil and gas from different places. Now, if we're building our own renewable energy in this country, we become secure because we're in control of that. It's here in this country. It doesn't rely on global shocks in the way that we really, and there are reports that show, government risk reports that show that if we don't change the way we're producing our energy, there will be another shock further down the line, similar. Something else will happen that will equally affect the oil and gas prices. So we need to be self-reliant and we need to work with everyone in industry to get that done.
Yeah, well, plan B is we could be self-reliant on our own fossil fuels like America and be insulated from global shocks and rises. Now, listen, I know you want to talk about mortgage rates. Let's talk about that. You're saying 5 years of paying under the Conservatives. You got a price of 211 quid more in monthly mortgage payments under the Conservatives. How did you work that one out?
So that's from the ONS statistics. That's actually what exists now. So the average person who's had to remortgage is paying on average, according to the ONS, about £211 extra a month. Now, in some parts of that country, that's £1 for every three that families have. In other parts of the country, that's £1 for every two. So this is a huge increased cost, as we know, and we know that we need to focus on supporting families as they go through this crisis. And what we're saying is if you have 5 more years of the Conservatives, they have £71 billion of unfunded policies in their manifesto. If they were to introduce those, then you would have to, you'd have to see, the Bank of England would have no option but to increase interest rates, and we'd all be paying more on our mortgage. So we need to be really honest with the public about what is affordable and what isn't. And if you look at the Conservative manifesto, what they're promising is not affordable. They haven't costed it. And that's why Labour has got these 6 really clear policies that are all funded, they're all costed, so you know what you're getting. It's not going to make everything, transform overnight. We're being realistic about that, but we know that these 6 first steps are really good, solid changes to the way the country runs so that people can have more money in their pocket and they can have better public services.
Great stuff. Well, cheap mortgages for all is something I think we can all raise a glass to. Thank you. Hope that works out. Shadow Industry and Decarbonisation Minister Sarah Jones, thank you very much for joining us here on GB News. Now, coming up, is there any hope for England this Sunday, or will Gareth Southgate be the only thing coming home? I'm Martin Daubney on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Giovanni is axed following growing allegations of threatening and abusive behaviour.
We won't see his little toes dancing around the dance floor again, which is a shame.
Was it the BBC saying, we've had some bad publicity about this star, do we need to maybe let him go? Or was it Giovanni himself saying that, he's had to, with all the bad publicity and what's the allegations against him, he's walked away? We don't exactly know. But what we do know is that Amanda Abingdon, who he was coupled with last year on the last series of Strictly, left claiming that she had nasty behaviour from him in rehearsals when they were training for their routines. And she's also been diagnosed with PTSD, which she is blaming or claiming happened because of the training that she was put under Giovanni. It's very sad because I've met Giovanni on quite a few occasions, and he comes across as a very nice gentleman, actually, and the fans absolutely love him. And even though the allegations are out there against him, everybody I speak to in terms of the fans are on his side.
I mean, from the fans' point of view, they don't see what goes on behind the scenes. All they see is an incredibly gifted dancer who we're seeing footage of now.
It might come out later, but there's all sorts of things coming out because after Amanda came out and claimed all this behaviour against him, a male celebrity last week also came out and voiced their opinion. Yeah, a lot of fans will be gutted, but as you say, we don't know the full story yet as what's gone on.
And it's incredible pressure that no one's allowed to be, a duffer right from the start now.
I mean, it's one thing learning lines if you're an actor, but it's a different kettle of fish altogether if you're learning moves that you've never done before. So you've got...
The People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister. Which is it?
Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 10 to 6. We're on the final furlong. I'm Martin Daubney on GB News. Now, time for the sport now, as it's a huge weekend, of course, for England's hopes in the Euros. The Three Lions will face Slovakia in the round of 16 on Sunday after a set, got to be said, of disappointing results in the group stage. Well, joining me now, hopefully, to cheer me up, is football writer Harry Harris. Harry, always a delight to have you on the show. Please do your best. I've been absolutely depressed about this tournament so far. Can we have some miraculous turnaround? Let's go back to 1990. Bobby Robson did it. We had a terrible start, but it became a story of legends. Can we do the same again?
Yeah, well, I was there in 1990. I take all the credit for all of that, for all the criticism I gave the team. It galvanised them into doing so well. Look, they're not performing well. I think they've overperformed under this manager in the past, and now they're definitely underperforming. It's up to the players. I've never seen such a group of quality young players for some considerable time in an England team. Really, really impressive in their clubs. But, they do not look the same players playing for England. I think a lot to do with the manager. I think, these players have been playing for Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola. The top managers in world football earn £20 million a year. At the FA, they pay you £2 million a year. I think that tells you about the quality of the manager and his tactics and when he brings on substitutes and how he uses these young players. Everyone's calling for change. Will he change? Probably not. I think he was likened to an accountant in one report I read. I like Gareth Southgate. I always have done since he played for Crystal Palace. I think he's a very genuine guy. He's perfect for the FA. He doesn't put his foot in it. He says the right things, does the right things, but does he pick the right team?
Yeah, meanwhile, Harry, the fans are falling asleep on the terraces or going mad in pubs with frustration. The Red Sea has parted. We've got the easiest draw, the easiest route to the final. Fate, destiny seems to be on his side. The big thing is, when push comes to shove, we've got a quick minute, Harry Harris. Can Gareth Southgate leap like a salmon? Can he deliver? Or will, once again, he come home empty-handed and maybe that'll finish him off?
No, I think they can't do any worse. So we've got to go into this game with a lot of optimism. And if these young boys get into the team and they perform, I'll tell you what, we could easily win this competition. But, he's got to pick the right team. He's got to have the right tactics. And I'm not quite sure that that's going to happen.
we could easily win the competition. Harry Harris, there's a fine line between optimism and have you been at the Sherry. But look, thank you very, very much for doing your very best to cheer me up on this Friday afternoon. I hope you enjoyed the game. Harry Harris, always a pleasure, mate. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Now, don't forget, Michelle Dewberry is up next. She's got Craig McKinley, the bionic MP. That's a fantastic coup. He got a hero's welcome when he returned to the Commons, and deservedly so. And it'll be fascinating to get his take on this election campaign. It promises to be a fantastic show. Jubes and Co, 6 till 7, right after me. Have a fantastic weekend, and please enjoy the football and drink responsibly. Now it's time for your weather with Alex Deakin. Have a great weekend.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Afternoon, welcome along to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. A fresher feel out there, certainly compared to earlier in the week. Many of us having a fine end to the working week. It's just not particularly warm. And it's still quite gusty across northern Scotland. Plenty of showers packing in here. 1 or 2 showers across southern Scotland and northern England through the evening.